everybody, it's Romania Black, and Happy New Year! Because we're on Volume 8 of Heaven Official's Blessing! Yes, we are on Volume 8. It's still wintertime, so I feel this is appropriate. But it is New Year's. I'm so excited. And we just started Volume 8 last week. And yeah, starting off with a bang. Starting off with WuXiang seeming suspicious, is kind of suspicious, but then like Xie Lian saying, I don't care, you're still my friend, let's be friends, and WuXiang being like, but I don't deserve it, and Xie Lian's like, but you know, we all kind of deserve it, and then like Xie Lian being the festive spirit, and then of course, because it's MXTX, we can't have nice things, and so just as Xie Lian and WuXiang are about to make up, everything's about to get resolved, and then we're gonna go on forward and try to find Jun Woo, who shows up? But like the antithesis of Santa Claus, Bai WuXiang. So, yeah. So there's that. Not looking forward to that. But what can we do? So, yeah, this week we're going to be looking at chapters 235 to 238. Which is, again, 4 chapters. Who knows how long this will take to get through. But I'm really excited about this, right? I'm really excited about this. I have tried to talk with the Discord and look it up for myself, but I don't know about the manhwa chapters. I asked Anime Annie over on the Discord being like, do we know anything about chapter 102, or did Star Ember just stop at chapter 101? Because the last time, it was back in part 70, like 5 weeks ago, that we looked at the manhwa chapters, and it did kind of end definitively. It was like, you know, Hua Cheng and Xie Lian staring at each other and then getting to right before the events of the end of Volume 2, the start of Book 3, and Anime Annie's like, I've not heard anything from the Chinese sites, but usually they said they do make an announcement like this is the end of the volume, so I don't know what's going on. I'm just going to keep powering ahead and week to week check, and if the manhwa ended with chapter 101, we'll just have to make do with that, I suppose, right? I don't know. And then, like I said last week, if they end up updating after I've finished the novel series, then I'll either do an update during the spoiler corner of the Donghua, if it's still going on, or I'll do it during the audio drama episodes that I'm catching up with, or I'll just talk about it on Discord. That's all I know to do about that. So I don't know, but hopefully, because I'm like, if the manhwa is done for a while, then that's sad, but okay, but hopefully we get a couple more chapters of it before Star Ember goes on hiatus. But Star Ember does such an amazing job drawing it and creating it that I can't complain. I'm like, I'll just take whatever I get for Star Ember. If they want to take a break, go for it. So, but yeah, so we've got those 4 chapters today. It's pages 48 through 86, so it's a big old chunk of nearly 40 pages. I'm sure it'll end on a stupid cliffhanger to start out our new year, but why are we surprised? So I do have a couple comments I want to talk about before we dive into this chapter set, though. One being from Lou. I really liked this. I liked the idea that Qi Rong is very similar to the former Wind Master, Chong Shizhen. I'm my tongue tied. Other than the former Wind Master, in that they both have become similar but different over the course of the story. And yeah, I thought that was a really good comparison to make, that both the former Wind Master and Qi Rong started out a certain way, and they are still at their core the same characters, but also at their core they've differed a little bit. And I kind of like that. I like that they both experienced this character growth. It's really nice. Especially Qi Rong in that chapter set, because he just like comes full circle and becomes a dad, and it's great, and he cements himself as like one of my favorite side characters. So I'm like, dang it! All right, I hope he's not dead completely. I hope he's not. I hope he comes back in this volume, at least by the end, or at least we get like a little hope that he's gonna come back. I hope so, because I don't want to be gone completely. That'd be really sad. But I guess if he is gone completely, he went out with a bang and like went out being great. And I'm like, okay, Qi Rong, you're like a trash king, but you're like an updated trash king. You're not a total dumpster fire, right? Kix K talks about the Chinese phrase, even dead water will still be moved or rippled by wind. I love that. The beef leaf shipper in me was just on cloud 9 reading that. I was like, yes, because Heshan can't help it. Heshan can't help it. Even though they're like, they despise what the Windmaster's brother. I think it's rather interesting because Heshan absolutely hates the Windmaster's brother and despises him, and then by proxy kind of seems to dislike the Windmaster as well. But then you have the Windmaster who kind of despised his brother's friends. So it's kind of like, he's like, look, I know you hated my brother. I hated his friends. What do we do with this? I love that phrase, Kix K, so I'm glad you pointed that out. That was great. And SQQLBH 314 kind of ties into that, talking about how, I didn't think of it this way, but Heshan giving the former Windmaster the fan was kind of like a test, similar to what Jun Woo's been doing with the Heavenly Officials, in saying, here's this fan, and it didn't even dawn on me, but SQQLBH 314's comment's so true. By giving the fan and spiritual energy to the former Windmaster, it's like saying, here's your one chance to get revenge on me. I've given you power. I've given you the method to do it. If you wanted to get revenge on me, now's your chance. Otherwise, you'll probably never get the chance to do this again, to take revenge on your brother. And the Windmaster doesn't even think about that. Doesn't even consider it. They immediately try to help the people. And I think that speaks so much to the Windmaster's character, that they, you know, all this horrible stuff happened to their brother by Heshan's hands, and they don't even consider revenge. They just are like, oh no, okay, thanks, I'm going to do this. Here's what I can do in the moment. And they turn on Jun Woo instead. And that just, I know Qirong is like skyrocketed as one of my favorite side characters in the story, but the Windmaster is still right up there as like the best friend. Like, they weren't going to let Xie Lian down by getting their own personal revenge in that moment. And I think that's why Heshan kind of goes, figures. Again, walks off at the end. I kind of, just like I want to see Qirong at the end of this story, I kind of want to see the Windmaster and Heshan talk one more time. But MXTX has this thing where sometimes they just let things go with the side characters and you don't get that resolution that you want. And it's kind of like MX being like, I can't please you all. And it's like, but I hope that they do. I really wish that they would. But I thought that was really, really good. I like that so, so much. And then Anime Annie finally talked about a few things. We were making this joke in the comment that Pei Ming and Yushi, the Rainmaster, who I ship wholeheartedly, I'm like, they are a shipping dynamic that I love. The idea that Pei Ming thinks he has to rescue all these women, and the one woman he can't rescue that rescues him, she's so indifferent, and she's like, okay, hey, you're fine. And he's just like, but, I love that dynamic so much. But I didn't even think about this either, but back when they were mortal, Pei Ming and Yushi were kind of enemies. And then in becoming immortals, they kind of, you know, have slowly, if you ship them together, it's like enemies to lovers, the trope. And I'm like, oh, and it's just like, anytime now that I see Pei Ming and the Rainmaster, I'm going to be thinking of the Weather Girls song, like, it's raining men, mainly Pei Ming, it's raining men. Like, yes. Also, we were talking about how, not necessarily Yushi does not fit this dynamic at all, but Pei Ming is so Ken from the Barbie movie. He's just so Ken. Like, Yushi's not Barbie. No, I'm not saying that at all. She's not like that. Yushi's a lot tougher than Barbie. But Ken, in that movie, Ryan Gosling's character, it's Pei Ming. He's just like the patriarchy. I love it. Kickskate pointed that out too, and in their comment and on the Discord, I like had a field day with it. I loved it so much. And honestly, Anime Annie pointed this out, saying Pei Ming and Qirong, they're kind of, in the weirdest ways, these feminist allies. They kind of are, because both Pei Ming and Qirong have kind of said in their talk about Shanji and to Shanji, this idea of, hey, you don't need him, or hey, instead of focusing on getting a man, focus on yourself. Like, love yourself first. And I'm like, in the weirdest of ways, they are. Like, Pei Ming and Qirong are really standing up for Shanji in the weirdest of ways. And I'm like, okay, MXTX. I'm like down with the patriarchy, misogyny. I'm fine with it. I'm okay with it. I thought that was so interesting. I'm like, all right, I'll take that. But I love these comments. The start of this volume has already been insane, and I'm here for it. So let's go, girls. But Happy New Year. Happy New Year, everybody. I'm super excited. We're starting the year off with a nice Dawn May Monday, and how could we not? So I'm excited. I've talked for nearly 10 minutes. I feel like that's enough, and I'm really excited to get into this chapter set. I couldn't wait. So We are going to start chapters 235 to 238. We scooch on in here of Heaven Official's Blessing. And we're going to do that here in 3, 2, 1. And let's dive in. Chapter 235. The Heaven Crossing Bridge. 3 idiots return to olden times. What? Are we talking about the three idiots? Are we talking about the mountain spirits? Or what? Who knows if it was a fear of obliteration or the scorching hot lava, but Xie Lian's entire person was submerged. And it was a long while before Xie Lian slowly came to. Oh! The moment he woke, he was lying on a cold, solid ground. WuXiang was slumped down next to him, staring at him in a daze. Xie Lian's vision was still faintly red, and he instantly sat up. Oh, so long! Yet unexpectedly, the moment he sat up, WuXiang snapped out of it and yelled, "Don't move around!" Xie Lian subconsciously extended a hand to support himself on the ground and off of it, but the support felt empty. Xie Lian lost his balance and his entire person almost toppled down. Surprised, Xie Lian finally discovered he wasn't lying on the ground at all. He was lying atop a bridge. Oh, is this the bridge that Junwoo tried to make that fell? Oh. This place was an underground rock cave with an immense space, its dome penetrating into the vast night sky. And within the cave floated a desecrated bridge. Oh, yes, I think it is. The body of the bridge was crippled, terrifyingly pitch black, seeming like wood but also stone, looking as if it experienced thousands of years of rain and storms, sealed away in its burning. Without any pillars to support it, it hung in midair, endlessly stretching from both ends into infinity. That's terrifying. Its beginning unknown, its end unforeseeable, and its direction a mystery. Some places were as wide as 30 feet, and some places were so narrow only a person could cross through. Thousands of feet beneath this broken bridge was the burning and rolling red-hot lava pool like the red basin of hell. The Heaven Crossing Bridge. This is a terrifying description of MXTX. Those 3 words were the first to pop in Xie Lian's mind. 2,000 years ago, in order to overcome disaster, the Crown Prince of Wuyang had built a bridge to cross to the heavens. Could this bridge be its remains? He remembered he was forcibly pulled down by the white no-face, so how he had ended up on this bridge? Xie Lian crawled to his feet. "Sun Long!" WuXiang sat still on the side. "Don't bother calling, he's not here." Well, Xie Lian turned to him. "How did we end up here? Was a distance shortening array activated halfway?" "Probably," WuXiang said. "I was falling straight for the lava pool, but halfway in the air I was sent here." Poor Feng Shen. All 3 of them had fallen, and he was the only one who stayed up there. He would probably curse the streets again. But finding Hua Cheng was a priority. Where had he been moved to? Xie Lian spotted the Feng Shen and the long saber that had been tossed to the side and picked them up. Then he walked to WuXiang. WuXiang saw him dangling the sword, approaching with a dark expression, and without knowing what Xie Lian was thinking of doing, his expression suddenly turned nervous. However, Xie Lian handed him the saber and then extended a hand to him. "Are you all right? If you're fine, then get up. We have to get going." He thought he was going to hurt him, and of course not. WuXiang looked at the hand that was extended to him, and after a long silence, he shook his head. "I can't go. My hands and feet are all injured." Xie Lian crouched down and checked him over for a moment. Sure enough, both of WuXiang's hands were red, and there were burns on his legs too, so he probably could only walk slowly. After a moment of contemplation, Xie Lian said, "Let me assist you, then." He pulled WuXiang up after resting an arm over his shoulder, and then walked while supporting him thus. After a few steps, WuXiang suddenly blurted, "Why?" Xie Lian was scanning their surroundings calculatively, and he replied, "Why what? I thought after you found out I was fine too that you'd be more suspicious of me." WuXiang said, "Oh no?" Xie Lian replied, "Why? Because I know." "Know what?" "That you weren't lying," Xie Lian replied. Just what was WuXiang's expression was truly hard to describe. Xie Lian said quite matter-of-factly, "Didn't you ask me to believe you?" "I believe you, that's it." Xie Lian started, "How do I say this? I suppose I can say I've known you for many years now, so I'm still fairly certain on this. You're not someone like that. Haven't I said this before? You might spit in people's cups." But you would never do something like poisoning, said Cups. After hearing the first part, it almost seemed like WuXiang was touched. But after hearing the latter half of his face was turning dark. Well, that example's unnecessary. Seriously, don't bring it up anymore. I wouldn't do anything like spitting either. It's too classless. Xie Lian waved his hand. Oh, don't mind those little details. Besides, even if in 1 in a million chance I was unlucky enough to have misjudged you, you can't beat me in San Long. We'll smack you dead in one blow, so you're not a threat at all. WuXiang mumbled, you're doing this on purpose, aren't you? You're trying very hard to piss me off to death. I'm joking. In any case, Xie Lian stopped laughing, clutching WuXiang's arm as he looked forward. If you really did turn down doing a malicious deed, and Junwu trapped you with a cursed shackle, then I can't have you pay a bad price for it. He stated calmly, because what you did was the right thing. WuXiang stared at him for a good while, and then finally gritted his teeth. Xie Lian, you're really someone. Xie Lian instantly butted in. Drop it. Don't think I don't know what you think of me. You're still depending on me to support you here. Don't say anything that'll make me want to throw you down into the lava pool. Oh, WuXiang humped. Well, and here you are saving me, even though you know what I think of you. Likewise. Likewise, me saving you is just me following my own principles. That's all, Xie Lian replied. Besides, while you're someone who's curiously odd in all aspects, and there really was a time in the past that I really wanted to punch you to death. I didn't succeed back then, and after so long, I've lost interest too. But no matter how weird you are and how much I want to punch you, your sins don't warrant death. If I can save you, of course I'll save you. WuXiang deflated and humped a few snorts, and after a moment of quiet, he added, Your Highness, I actually... Right then, both their feet dipped and both their faces abruptly changed color. Oh, damn it, come on, MXTX, let him finish the thought! WuXiang was wounded and couldn't react in time, but fortunately, Xie Lian still moved with godly speed. His toes tipped, pushing off forward, and they lightly landed 30 feet ahead. When they looked back, the body of the bridge they were just walking on cracked and broke off, plunging straight down. There was a rumbling. A stretch of the pitch-black bridge body had crashed into the scarlet hell basin, and the resentful spirits that had been waiting for a long time, rolling in the pool, rapidly reached out. Hundreds of pairs of hands fought to grab, as if they wanted to use it as a vehicle to break away from the sea of suffering. However, their numbers were too great. That stretch of crippled bridge couldn't support them all, and it sank soon. The two of them watched shakily and exchanged a look. Xie Lian commented, well, it appears this bridge isn't too stable. Oh my god, the symbolism with this? Oh, we are going to talk about this. Oh my god. WuXiang opened and closed his mouth, probably meaning to say that they might as well turn back, that the surface of the bridge they were lying before was considerably spacious and shouldn't cave in. But with that stretch collapsing, there was no more path and they could no longer retreat. The only way for the two was forward. But that surface of the bridge ahead was alternatingly wide and narrow, like it was filled with traps, danger hiding in every corner. Who knows where the next step would have them fall? Without another word, Xie Lian threw WuXiang onto his back. Well, we can't stay in the same place for too long, otherwise who knows if it'll collapse too. Hold on tight, I'm going to quickly dash through this. As promised, Xie Lian indeed dashed out in flying steps. The further they went, the more suffocatingly narrow the bridge became. Even the widest area was not that much bigger than a door, the narrowest area no wider than a person's waist. However, even in such a perilous situation, wherever Xie Lian had passed, nothing moved in the slightest. The bottom of his feet only lightly tipped every time, and each time it was like a swallow lightly skimming the surface of water, withdrawing the moment there was contact. If there were other martial gods present, they would all be stunned by these steps that were so brilliantly controlled to the point it was horrifying, since there was no second martial god who could do the same. This was the masterful skill that could only come from one who didn't depend on spiritual powers and had trained vigorously day in and day out, like for 800 years, right? Oh, suddenly there was a pillar of fire rushed to the skies, blocking in front of Xie Lian. If it wasn't for his incredible reflexes allowing him to break in time, they would have charged right into the fire and been burnt to a crisp. The two looked down, since who knows when millions of resentful spirits, the same colors of molten rocks, had gathered down below, screeching and crackling, reaching their hands towards the two, and the pillar of fire was the blow sent forth by them. Their ears All were vaguely hurting, and WuXiang wondered, what are they screaming about? Xie Lian mumbled, come down, join us, rot to death here. WuXiang looked at him in fright. Oh, you understand them? They should be speaking in WuXiang tongue. Xie Lian nodded. They're the people of WuXiang who fell into the lava and burnt to death after the heaven-crossing bridge collapsed. Careful not to get tangled up with them. They'll pull everything they see into the lava. I knew this was the remnant body of the heaven-crossing bridge. Can they be absolved if they pull people down? WuXiang questioned. No, Xie Lian replied. They can't be absolved even if they pull others down. Those resentful spirits will never be able to receive absolution. But they enjoy seeing others suffer the same fate. This was precisely why they shall never receive absolution and must suffer the torment of this basin of hell. WuXiang was puzzled. How do you know so much? Xie Lian said, I don't know either, but it was probably him who told me. Just as how he transplanted the memories of those corpse-eating rats screeching. Those molten, resentful spirits seemed to be quite displeased that they still hadn't fallen, and they snuck around gathering together, whispering, holding hands, holding hands, ready to send forth another attack, and Xie Lian broke into a run. A pillar of fire instantly appeared, and what was already a bridge full of potholes became even more devastated. They couldn't just keep taking on beatings without retaliation. Xie Lian also tried blasting down below, but he didn't have much spiritual power left, so he couldn't blast very far. WuXiang's spiritual powers were much more sufficient and could blast farther, but he still just missed them by a bit. There were many times when the pillar of fire from below almost burnt their ankles, and the crowd of resentful spirits banded into a large group, their energy immense, and they giggled and laughed, pointing at them, exceedingly excited, as if they were watching some spectacle on escape. The two couldn't do anything to them at all, incredibly humiliating. So much so that WuXiang's knuckles cracked. A moment later, WuXiang, who was leaning on Xie Lian's back, gritted his teeth and panted a few breaths, like he had resolved to make a very difficult decision. Forget it, your highness! Xie Lian, let me down! Xie Lian was dashing as he answered, what are you saying? You love your life, and you're terrified of death. You're not someone who'd say something like that. Veins instantly popped violently on WuXiang's forehead. Well, I'm sorry for loving my life and being terrified of death, but since I'm going to die either way, before I change my mind, hurry up and put me down. Stop messing around. Don't talk anymore. You'll make me lose focus, Xie Lian said. What matters right now is finding the end of this bridge as soon as possible. Who's messing around? WuXiang exclaimed. If this bridge really is the heaven-crossing bridge, who the hell knows how much more you'll have to run? We'll be toppled by them sooner or later. Put me down. I'll go put away those shady trash. You just go on ahead. Then he lightly tapped Xie Lian's shoulder and flew off. Landing behind, Xie Lian looked back and walked a step towards him. WuXiang stated, don't come over. The bridge here is narrow. If you come over, both of us will fall. Xie Lian could only pause in his step. WuXiang humphed again. You're right. We're alike. You think me odd? I think you to be rather weird, too. He looked Xie Lian in the eyes. Since we've come to this point, I might as well just tell it to you straight. I've got lots of opinions on you. Oh, well, I knew this already a long time ago, Xie Lian said. WuXiang said coldly, oh, really? Then did you know that I often think that you only depended on your status, even though you're His Highness the Crown Prince, and you had good fortune? Your skills aren't that much better than mine. I also think that you only like doing all those good deeds in order to show off to others, so you can enjoy praise and flattery. In fact, you helping me was all because of this reason, because I'm the perfect subject for you to demonstrate your sympathy and kindness. To be honest, I haven't changed some of those beliefs even now. Maybe they'll never change. Even if I were to suppress them for a while, after a period of time, they'll still resurface. Xie Lian didn't know whether to sweat drop or what at this point. There was no need to tell these things in such detail to the man himself. Yet unexpectedly, WuXiang continued with, but more often than not, I'm still rather in awe of you. Xie Lian was taken aback. WuXiang gathered his courage, looking like someone who was choking his neck, forcing him to speak, and he said stiffly, isn't that normal? You certainly are rather amazing. You're also a better person than me. Long story short, I very much wanted to become your friend. Xie Lian had never in a million years imagined there'd be one day he'd hear these words uttered from WuXiang's lips. While they were stuttered, unwilling, and stiff, but those were such honest, sincere, and sensible words. His eyes widened. Will you? WuXiang had finally squeezed those words out through the cracks of his teeth and exhaled a breath. That incident during that time after Shanla's fall, whether right or wrong, whether or not, if I was in a difficult situation, I still owe you an apology nonetheless. Xie Lian was stumped for a moment. It's all bygone, so let it go. Rather than let's get out of here first. WuXiang raised his voice. He told me that if I was suspicious, then even if you knew I didn't do it, you would still go with the flow and not save me. Because you hate me and you wouldn't believe in me. Xie Lian understood who this he was. WuXiang continued, even though I didn't agree to help him, but everything he said, I've thought of it too. I've always thought that deep down you hated me, you despised me, so I've always... Anyway, you don't actually think that, and I'm glad. Another pillar of fire roared to the skies, and Xie Lian backed away a few steps to dodge it, moving further away from WuXiang. As for WuXiang, rage swarmed up, and he sprawled down, violently slapping his palms down the surface of the bridge. Xie Lian's pupils shrank. What are you doing? As expected, the stretch of the bridge caved, taking WuXiang along as it crashed down. WuXiang shouted towards him in midair, helping you clean out trash! The broken bridge slammed into the pool, exciting a surge of tall waves, and those molten, resentful spirits were swarming over happily, ready to drag him down, yet unexpectedly, a rumbling blast swept over and dissipated a large field of them. Amidst the wailing of ghosts, WuXiang stood in the center of that broken bridge, the spiritual light enveloping him in a blazing to the brightest, and he sneered, you band of trash from the gutters of the shadows, feeling good setting off unscrupulous fires. Well, I've come, so don't you run away now! Now his blast could finally reach those molten, resentful spirits. WuXiang raised his blood-red palms, madly sweeping at the resentful spirits, killing to his heart's content, so savage that the resentful spirits further downstream, who were just watching the show, all scattered, screaming and swimming away in all directions. Fires had started to catch on his sleeves and hems, and Xie Lian hung over the edge above. WuXiang, how high can you jump? WuXiang shouted, why do you have so much rubbish to say? Why haven't you left? Xie Lian argued back, well, that's not my problem. You finally said something sensible in your life, and then you fall off just like that. How can I leave now? WuXiang was outraged. What do you mean, finally something so sensible? Before he finished, that piece of broken bridge under his feet sank a few notches. Both their faces changed. At this point, he really was going to be buried at the bottom of the lava pool, his bones dissolving into the air. WuXiang was so full of spirit earlier, but now his face paled. He raised his palms, closing his eyes, looking as if he was going to smash through his own skull first before he was going to be burnt to death, so he could die more straightforwardly. And Xie Lian hastily cried, wait a minute, don't be so rash, I've got a plan! WuXiang opened his eyes again. What plan? Although Ruyi couldn't reach the very bottom, it could go halfway, and Xie Lian tossed it down. Jump with everything you've got! Jump and I'll catch and I'll pull you up! WuXiang's face was turning even paler. If I could jump, would I need to think of a way? Then he prepared to fill himself with courage again to smack himself dead. Xie Lian exclaimed, wait, really, wait, I'll think of a way soon. Well, then speak. A way, quick, think of a way. There's nothing. The two were practically at the end of their ropes, and WuXiang raised his hand again. Yet unexpectedly, right then, another hand slapped his hand away before catching him. Then, dangling a near blank-minded WuXiang in his hold, the man leapt. Xie Lian felt the other end of the white silk band tightening. He looked down, and he was both surprised and overjoyed. It was Feng Shan! Oh my god! That piece of crippled bridge WuXiang had been standing on had thoroughly sunk into the depths of the lava stream bubbling. And at the end of the white silk band, Feng Shan was gripping Ruyi with one hand, and the other hand was holding the steel-faced WuXiang, and he shouted towards him, Your Highness, quick, pull us up! There were more empty-shelled mutants paddling down over below, and it seemed Feng Shan had been riding them, floating over from upstream. Xie Lian had no time to ask questions and hurriedly found an area of the bridge that was somewhat wider and sturdier before pulling them up. The two were being lifted steadily, but down below a new band of molten resentful spirits had gathered gradually, maliciously looking upwards, grumbling as they huddled, and soon after another pillar of fire was shot up. Function and Wuxiang were hung in midair, unable to dodge. And Xie Lian picked Rui up and moved several steps away to evade the attack, but nowhere else on the bridge was as spacious or stable as this area, so after dodging that blow he could only return. Function was almost burnt by the pillar of fire, and he shouted in outrage, "What's with this band of dog shits? Attacking people while they're down, so vile, well, fuck your entire family!" Xie Lian responded, "If their entire families all look like that, then are you sure you want to fuck them?" Oh my god. The resentful spirits hadn't given up, giggling as they appeared ready to continue their ambush. Function was at the height of his temper, and he raised Wuxiang up, grunting, "Well, hold on to this!" Wuxiang had thought he was actually going to die earlier. The shock was too great, so even now his reaction was a little dull, and he followed the order to grab onto Rui. Without the need to hold him, Function freed up a hand, and he pulled out the longbow that he carried on his back, as well as several wooden sticks he picked up from who knows where. Using the sticks as arrows, he held the bow with one hand and used his teeth to bite back the bowstring. Setting the arrow onto the string, he pulled back steadily, and there was a whoosh, and 4 arrows were let fly at once. The arrows struck into the lava pool, erupting into blossoms of waves, and the molten resentful spirits rolled over themselves in terror, scattering once again. Function finally felt gratified, and he cussed, "See that? I said I'll fuck you up, you fucking dog shits. This ancestor can blow you all up with just one hand." He sounds a lot like Qi Rong, doesn't he? Oh my god. At last, the three finally stood together upon the heaven-crossing bridge, and Xie Lian wiped his sweat many times, and his heart was still thumping. "Function, how have you come?" Having had brought this up, Function immediately clutched his head. "How have I come? The 3 of you all jumped. What else was I to do? I almost fucking went crazy. I could only find a way to go to the bottom of that cliff, and then I drifted all the way here. I only found you two after hearing all that rumbling and voices. What were you both doing jumping into the lava pool? Madness!" Wuxiang had finally come to his senses and exclaimed, "Well, I was dragged down." Imagining that Function had cursed the entire way in distress, Xie Lian replied, all right, calm down. No matter what, you were truly a godsend, a major help. You know what they say, sometimes people really need someone to help pull them up in order to get by. Really." The 3 were all scared half to death, and after a mess of sorting themselves out, panting and steel-faced, they didn't dare to stick around. Function carried Wuxiang on his back, and they continued to leap forward down the heaven-crossing bridge. Having leapt for a stretch and exchanging the things they saw, Xie Lian learned that Function hadn't seen Hua Cheng either, and his heart couldn't help but tighten. Where was Hua Cheng? They couldn't only keep going down along the bridge to keep searching. Just then, Function said to Wuxiang, who was on his back, "By the way, those words you were screaming earlier, I heard a bit. The first part was enraging and makes me want to beat you up, but I hadn't imagined that in the end, you little bastard actually thought that all in your heart." Wuxiang's face darkened completely. Function turned to Xie Lian. "Didn't I tell you already? This guy, his feelings are more twisted than the resentful concubines of the deep harem, completely unfathomable." Xie Lian could see Wuxiang's face was now completely shrouded, and he waved his hand madly at him. Function was entirely oblivious and turned to Wuxiang. "If you had wanted to be friends with His Highness, then just say so. Going around making people sick with all that sarcasm just because you thought His Highness despised you so you couldn't be friends anymore? I really don't know what your brain is thinking." Xie Lian gave up and waved dismissively. "Hasn't he been like this since we were young? Don't scold him anymore. Look, his face is all red." Wuxiang couldn't endure any longer and roared, "What the fuck? What the actual fuck? Can you two just shut up?" Xie Lian reminded him, "You seem to have caught Function's vocabulary. And also, it's not very good to swear." Function piped up, "Well, you said it yourself. You very much wanted to be His Highness's friend." He even purposefully imitated Wuxiang's teeth-grittering stutter. And Wuxiang's face had become savage, his hand already sneaking to his back to find his saber. Function added, "All right, now everything's out in the open. Anyway, you just remember this. His Highness never thought you so filthy in his mind. Other than that time you crossed the line and he got mad, afterwards he's never said a single bad word about you in front of me. You just act like a normal person from now on, talk normally, express yourself normally, and if you're gonna be sarcastic again, I'm gonna yell at you." Wuxiang listened to the first part while hanging his head, his lips sealed and speaking But as he listened to the latter half, he rolled his eyes. Well, haven't you already yelled at me for hundreds of years? Xie Lian reminded him, WuXiang, you're a heavenly official. You've got to watch the impression you're going to make, right? You can't roll your eyes so easily. If your devotees catch on, they'll have opinions. Please, WuXiang said. This guy curses all day in the upper court. Function humped. Well, that's because you deserve it. Oh my God, they're like a married couple. Stop. Stop bringing up old quarrels with me, WuXiang said. Didn't you also ditch His Highness to go have a son? Veins were now popping on Function's forehead, and he rolled up his sleeves. Well, you looking for a fight? WuXiang sneered. Fight yourself. If it wasn't you talking crap about me to His Highness all day, do you think I would have thought he looked down on me and got all weird? The subject was about to sink into forbidden territory again, and Xie Lian spoke up. Will you both not air out each other's dirty laundry at a time like this? What's the point of hurting each other? WuXiang rolled his eyes again. Besides, look at you. Freaking out back then. So what if he was robbed? So what if he robbed? If I was His Highness at that point, I'd rob 18 wealthy, prominent households and would never bat an eye. And to think you're the helping hand, chasing after His Highness to demand what happened. Sweat rolled down Xie Lian's forehead and he looked back. Now, wait a second. There's no need to air out mine either. In any case, find so long. Help me find so long! Was this one chapter? This was one chapter! Oh my God! What? Bloody Sought Flower, chapter 236, the vicious battle against the white no-face. Oh my God! What is this set? No! I ain't ready for this, y'all. I ain't ready for this. Right then, the three felt at the same time a wave of surging heat coming from below. They all cried together, "Watch out!" and their feet moved faster. 7 or 8 pillars of fire charged to the skies, and looking down, there were now even more molten, resentful spirits. Function, give WuXiang to me, Xie Lian called out. Without another word, Function tossed WuXiang to from his back, and once on Xie Lian's back, WuXiang exclaimed, Put them down quick, what a nuisance! I don't need you to tell me, Function replied, and pulled the bowstring back, shooting multiple rounds at once. The attacking area of his weapons was far wider than Xie Lian, and Function blindly shooting blasts. The arrows exploded the lava waves, the surges erupting high into the air, and the screams came from all around. Nice work, Xie Lian complimented. It's all right, I guess, WuXiang commented from his back. The resentful spirits were full of rancor, and after huddling, they swarmed much further ahead, working together to blow flames. After several rumblings, Xie Lian said, the stretch of the bridge ahead has been burnt through by them. They want to block our way out. Function cursed. Oh, fucking God. Look at them huddling like that, working so hard together. Why can't they go do something else? Like, instead of harming people? I doubt any of you will be able to receive absolution and escape the lava for another 8,000 years if you keep that up. The moment he raised his bow, the molten, resentful spirits all scattered again. Xie Lian said, all right, don't yell anymore. Get ready. We're going to jump. 1, 2, 3. On the count of 1, they started to increase their power and speed up. On the count of 2, they calculated the number of steps. And on 3, their feet pushed off and jumped. The 3 figures leapt into the air, passing over the broken gap between the bridge, and then landed on the other side. They continued their mad dash. The bridge was made for crossing onto the heavens, so naturally, it would gradually slope up. But Xie Lian was becoming as light as a swallow the more he ran. It's been a long time since the 3 of us did something like this, huh? Do you mean fighting side by side or running for our lives? WuXiang questioned. Both, Xie Lian said. We clearly do this all the time, Function exclaimed. Really? Xie Lian wondered. But when some things come out into the open, the mindset would be completely different. Xie Lian laughed for a moment, but his eyes had been watching carefully down below. Yet there was never still a sight of a red silhouette, so he couldn't help but be a little bit on edge. San Long! His call echoed in the expanse of an empty underground cave, but no one answered. Xie Lian's lips were going dry, and he licked them. On his back, WuXiang had watched him looking over the area, and after a moment of silence, he said, Your Highness, you really like him, huh? Xie Lian hadn't expected him to suddenly ask this. While his face was completely blank, the tips of his ears were slowly turning red. Seeing him like this, WuXiang was speechless, and only spoke up after a moment of hesitation. I'm not trying to scare you on purpose or anything, but I have to remind you. Have you ever thought maybe we were the only 2 sent to the bridge and the Crimson Rain Sought Flower wasn't? Isn't that completely rubbish, Function said. Since there's only 2 of you here, then of course he was sent elsewhere. He had talked to this point before he realized that what Wuxiang was trying to say. He wasn't saying that Hua Cheng was sent elsewhere, but maybe Hua Cheng had already fallen into the lava pool. Xie Lian licked his lips. Well, how is that possible? Don't think it impossible, Wuxiang said. Crimson Right sought Flower as a supreme ghost king, no doubt about that. But White No Face is one too. Besides, he's the first generation of supreme ghost kings, the master of Mount Tonglu. This place is his territory, the domain where spiritual powers are the strongest. Function glared madly at Wuxiang and scolded, "Shut your mouth! What's wrong with you? Can't you say something good at a time like this? He's the Crimson Right sought Flower, I'm telling you!" Wuxiang indeed stopped, but still had to rebuke. "I just think we have to consider what to do in case of anything." Before Xie Lian's eyes, that abnormally bright red dot on Hua Cheng's pale palm appeared. And he didn't know what to say either. Just as he was going to speak, he suddenly came to an abrupt stop, and Feng Xin, who was behind him, almost slammed into him. "What is it?" The moment the words left his lips, he found there was no need to ask. Ahead of them, enveloping the air all around, were millions of shimmering silver sparkles, twinkling like the stars. It was as if someone had toppled a treasure box full of silver powder. Xie Lian put Wuxiang down and walked forward. He's like, "No, I gotta get out of this." He reached out a hand and gently felt a piece of silver light that was slightly bigger than the rest. After touching it, he then closed his palm and slowly brought it before his own eyes. The other two approached to look too, and Feng Xin muttered, "This is..." Wuxiang said straightforwardly, "It's a fragment of a wraith butterfly." Feng Xin glared at him in rage again, probably scornful that Wuxiang was being overly straightforward. "I like that he's thinking of Xie Lian." Xie Lian's hand trembled a little, and he clenched that broken piece of silver butterfly wing that was still emitting a faint light and exhaled a long breath. Feng Xin scratched his head. "Look on the bright side. At least he didn't actually fall into the lava pool. He must have been here, right?" Wuxiang pointed to the side, "Then fought with someone here. A major fight." Xie Lian's gaze followed the direction he was pointing and slightly widened his eyes. The rocks in all directions were covered with countless terrifying gash marks from sharp blades. It was the blade mark of a Ming. Each saber strike slashed to the bone. It wasn't like Xie Lian had never seen Hua Cheng use a saber before in the past, but his style had always been easy and leisurely, nonchalant and casual. Rather than say he was handling a weapon, it was more like he was toying with a small knife. Yet those blade marks were filled with killing intent. It was easy to imagine just how skilled the one exchanging blows with him was, and how perilous the battle. I can't believe MXTX is not showing us this, but are we surprised at this point? Without saying a word, Xie Lian fell to the ground to check. There was no trace on the bridge of anyone having fallen, and there were no cheering, resentful spirits gathered below the bridge either, so Xie Lian finally somewhat relaxed and crawled to his feet, sprinting forward resolutely on his own. "Why don't you check your hand for the thread?" Behind him, Feng Xin carried Wuxiang on his back and caught up. "Your Highness!" Xie Lian held his breath because he didn't want to hear his own harsh, anxious breathing. Messing up breathing was a great taboo for one who practiced the martial arts. Not only did it add unnecessary burdens to the body, but it would derange the rhythm of the heart. But even holding his breath was useless. His arms, legs, hands were all shaking. And as he ran and ran, he fell. He even tripped, falling and tumbling, rolling dozens of times, and even nearly rolling off the bridge. Feng Xin and Wuxiang both started yelling, telling him to be careful. Suddenly, Xie Lian said, "What's that sound?" Xie Lian stood steady on his feet again and turned. "Did you guys hear something? Is that the sound of something?" Feng Xin and Wuxiang both cried, "Yes! Yes!" It was the cracking and rumbling of sounds of weapons clashing and spiritual powers colliding. Even the bridge body of the heaven-crossing bridge was faintly shaking. In the darkness of the path ahead, there were lights going on and off. There were people ahead fighting. Xie Lian half crawled and half stumbled as he charged forward. Behind him, Feng Xin muttered, "Oh dear fucking God, may all the gods and Buddhas grant their blessings. That better absolutely be the Crimson Rain sought Flower, otherwise he's gonna go mad!" "Stop your rubbish," Wuxiang berated. "We're all the gods and Buddhas ourselves, and we can't grant shit. Just keep up with him. Look at the stumbling way he's running. He's gonna trip and fall to his blade death before he even sees the man." Xie Lian had completely forgotten about holding his breath and just listened to his own disorderly panting for 5 or 6 miles. After rounding a few giant winding paths, finally, at the last corner, bright white light erupted his field of vision. At the end of the hanging heavenly cross bridge, a red-clad man and a white-clad man were engaged in a vicious battle. The red-clad man wielded a slender, long, silvery white scimitar. his form beguiling, flashing out like lightning. It was Hua Cheng. He wasn't smiling anymore, completely focused, his expression sharp, a smear of a bloody mark on his handsome and pale cheek, adding vivid brightness to the biting frost. The white-clad man was, of course, the White No-Face, and he was wielding a sword that came from who knows where. That half-smiling, half-crying, cry-smiling mask still on his face. Only, the mask and what Xie Lian had seen before were now somewhat different. It was cracked in the middle. The crack was significant, unable to be ignored, and it went from the heart of the forehead all the way down to the cheek below the eye, like it was going to break at any moment. Both were exceedingly light on their feet, tipping before blitzing in seconds, the aura of evil erupting into the air. Each of their strikes were heavy like 1,000 tons, their force blasting through the skies. The aura of the blade against the winds of the saber, a maniacal dance, a chaotic fight, and the wraith butterflies above were also matching with the molten resentful spirits below, shrieking at one another. Like the mountains collapsing and the seas toppling. Every time they clashed, the molten lava and blazing fires from the pool would explode, the terrifying waves surging meters high, and no one else could get close at all. Function and WuXiang came around afterwards, and they were both shaken by the scene, nailed to the ground by their shock and unable to move a single step. Not a single martial god could watch a battle such as this and not feel excitement. To see Hua Cheng perfectly fine, and Xie Lian's highly strung heart could finally rest. He immediately wanted to collapse on the ground and scream and yell, but he forced himself to hold it in. When skilled fighters clashed, any instance of disturbance could determine victory and defeat. Besides, this was a battle between two supreme ghost kings of their time. In the far distance on White No-Face's side, there was also another figure standing, and it was the Goshi. Naturally, he was brought here by White No-Face. Seeing Xie Lian and company had come, he breathed in relief, but he didn't dare to recklessly make any noise either. Yet who knew Hua Cheng had already noticed the newcomers, and his frozen, frost-like focus and melted slightly, and a grin finally widened on his face. It seems you've lost again. His Highness has come, and not a single person is missing from the ones that he brought with him. Xie Lian couldn't hold back any longer, and he shouted, "Sun Long!" Hua Cheng inclined his head, and he answered, "Gege." Then his tone turned into one of warning. "Gege, the next time you make yourself fall like that, I'm going to go mad." Xie Lian responded to, "The next time you jump down with me, I'll get even more mad." Hearing this, Hua Cheng's expression seemed to stiffen for a second, as if Xie Lian's words really did make him wary. Even when facing White No-Face, he had never shown such a wary expression. The White No-Face crushed in. The one he struck at was Hua Cheng, but the one he spoke to was Xie Lian. "Shanla, aren't you two enjoying your spring tailwinds too much and underestimating me?" The eyeball on the hilt of a Ming noticed Xie Lian and started madly spinning in circles. Hua Cheng flipped his hand and thrust, and Xie Lian heard a crack and his heart lurched. Oh my God! Chapter 237, The Bloody Sought Flower. Vicious Battle Against the White No-Face, Part 2. It was the sound of a weapon breaking. All those present hastily looked to where the sound came from. They saw the scimitar in Hua Cheng's hand was fine, but the long sword wielded by White No-Face had been snapped in half by Hua Cheng's strike. The eyeball in the scimitar Ming saw Xie Lian and spun crazily in circles, looking like it had shown itself off in front of Xie Lian and was feeling so happy it was going to ascend. Hua Cheng laughed heartily and said easily, "It's fine, there's no need for Gege to worry." Then he rebutted to the White No-Face, "And why do I have to care for the likes of you?" The White No-Face humped, and the Goshi couldn't hold back anymore, afraid Hua Cheng was going to provoke his opponent. "Young man, don't be so cocky!" Yet unexpectedly, what Hua Cheng said next was even more audacious and brazen. Wielding the saber single-handedly, its sharp luster brilliant, he pointed it at White No-Face and smiled. "After all, in the end, you're nothing more than an addled old fart with a heart filled with jealousy." Never mind Goshi, who had lost all his energy to berate his fake smile. Both Function and WuXiang were stunned too. This man's way was too gutsy. Who would dare say such a thing to either JUN or the White No-Face faces? But they all had to admit that only Hua Cheng would dare say those words, since he was probably the only one who could say those things, and JUN or White No-Face could still do nothing to him. WuXiang got off on his own, walked a few steps and mumbled, well, no wonder, in the past, when it came to the crimson rain-sought flower, Junwu always said to avoid him if we can, and not to face him head-on. Right then a ball of white shadow flashed by, blocking in front of the point of Iming's blade. Xie Lian's eyes were sharp and saw clearly what that creature was. "So long, don't cut that thing! It was the fetus spirit!" He saw it, so naturally Hua Cheng saw it too. The point of the blade veered, withdrawing at will, changing the slashing motion to flicking, fleeing that ball of white away. Function had his pupils shrink earlier, and only snapped out of it when he saw the fetus spirit wasn't chopped in two. "Well, come here!" The direction Hua Cheng had flung that fetus spirit was exactly towards him. Function rushed up for it, but while there weren't many hairs on its head in the first place, with his shout, the hairs all stood, angry gurgling coming from its throat. The moment Function went up, it chomped at him like mad, incessantly, refusing to let him pick it up. Function couldn't help but be outraged. "Well, fucking hell, when it sees him, it sticks on. When it sees me, it bites. Just who is your dad here?" WuXiang, however, commented coolly, Have you ever taken it for your son? Have you ever called its name properly?" Hearing this, Function was taken aback. On the other end, Xie Lian couldn't stay still watching the battle and hastily instructed, "The two of you be careful, I'll go and see." WuXiang said quietly, "You be careful yourself. Don't forget you still have 2 bands on your person." Xie Lian was slightly taken aback and unconsciously touched his neck, feeling that cursed shackle. But for some reason, he felt White No-Face wouldn't use the cursed shackle to threaten him. There wasn't any more time to parse words, and he rushed forward. On the other side, one flash of red and one flash of white were steeped in a vicious battle, and after observing for a moment, Xie Lian determined that it was hard to recklessly join in the chaotic fight. Rui was whipped out, and the Goshi was wrapped and pulled over. "Oh, master, are you all right?" The Goshi wiped his face full of cold sweat. "I'm fine." "If you're fine, then why are you sweating so heavily?" Xie Lian questioned. "Well, isn't it all thanks to that crimson rain-sought flower? That little bastard with no filter on his mouth. What a fright!" The Goshi berated. Just then, they heard Function give a surprised shout. Xie Lian raised his head and looked over, and saw the White No-Face was slowly dropping a hand. One of his arms was injured. He flipped open his palm and saw his own hand was covered in blood, and sighed, chuckling. "It's been many years since anyone's managed to hurt me like this." Xie Lian felt a sense of foreboding and asked, "Master, is he mad?" The Goshi, who could be considered as the only one in the world who understood the White No-Face the best right now, said, "No, it's worse than anger. He's happy." After a pause, the White No-Face turned to Hua Cheng. He asked, his voice full of curiosity, "Your scimitar, was it forged by that missing eye of yours?" It was obvious that Hua Cheng had no interest in responding, but Xie Lian's heart jumped violently. From the first time he saw Iming, he knew the scimitar must be unusual, but he had only half guessed that perhaps it was forged from the eye Hua Cheng had lost. White No-Face's voice was so confident. Could that really be true? The Goshi's brow knitted, and after a moment he suddenly spoke up. "Oh, I remember now." "What do you remember?" Xie Lian asked. "I remember that they told me of the incident. Many hundreds of years ago, a vicious ghost had come to Mount Tonglu." "I'm sure there's at least 1,000,000 vicious ghosts that have paid a visit to Mount Tonglu," WuXiang said. "Don't interrupt!" the Goshi exclaimed. "That vicious ghost, the time it took to form was very short. It was very young, and when it had come, it was almost ready to dissipate completely. Yet for some reason, it held on and drifted here." For some reason, Xie Lian's heart was thumping like mad. "It almost dissipated completely. How come?" "It seemed to have suffered great damage," the Goshi replied. "Its soul was pretty much all scattered, and it wasn't very conscient either. But it still floated, repeating again and again that it wouldn't leave. Probably because its wish hadn't been fulfilled. Anyway, that year when Mount Tonglu opened, an accident happened." Xie Lian heard it wouldn't leave, and his heart softened for some reason, but also squeezed at the same time. He then immediately asked, "What accident?" "Within Mount Tonglu, not only did millions of ghosts gather, a group of live mortals who had accidentally intruded were also locked inside." "What?" "There are nothing but monsters and demons inside of Tonglu. The common people can't break out at all and can only suffer the fate of becoming nutrients. However, for whatever reason, that vicious ghost, in its muddled state, took that large group of live mortals under its wing and fled for many days. In the end, they were still surrounded by millions of ghosts trapped in a dead end, and it was going to be eaten along with those humans. Xie Lian knew this lonesome, drifting feral ghost must have been Hua Cheng. And then, he pushed, was there a way to break away to safety? Yes, the ghostie replied. Forge a blood weapon and kill to break the siege. WuXiang still couldn't help but chip in. Then the easiest sacrifice would be, it would be those humans that fell into the state of devastation. Fengshen and WuXiang looked to White No-Face and Hua Cheng, who were completely focused on their vicious battle. Did he? Xie Lian held his breath. Goshi said yes. It made a move. Fengshen and WuXiang's expressions became unreadable. Xie Lian, however, didn't move a muscle and waited for the Goshi to continue. Sure enough, the Goshi answered with what he had anticipated. It made a move. In a fit of madness, it dug out one of its own eyes. The Goshi continued, that vicious ghost almost made a move against those humans, but for some reason in the end, it didn't. It instead used one of its own eyes as the price to forge a blood weapon. That vicious ghost was almost already forcibly hanging on to its last breath, and after digging out its eyes, it should have broken completely. Yet somehow, something had shocked it, and it instead woke to its senses completely. Who knows what kind of wicked device it forged that actually carried it through the battle? And there was another curious incident. Xie Lian tried to force himself to calm one incident. Apparently, after that battle, the heavens sent forth a heavenly calamity, and it struck straight into Mount Tonglu. Do you understand what that means? Was there any need to explain what it meant? To have a heavenly calamity be sent forth, it meant the heavens believed there was someone who was worthy to ascend within Mount Tonglu. Xie Lian grabbed the Goshi. Who was it who ascended? This is all hearsay, the Goshi said. But there wasn't any heavenly officials in the upper court that came to Mount Tonglu. Either what I heard was purely fabricated, or the one who ascended jumped back down and rejected the heavenly realm. Oh, WuXiang couldn't accept this at all, and he was perplexed to ascend as a ghost. Is there such a thing? And it refused its ascension and jumped back down? It can't be him. It can it? He only just entered Mount Tonglu then. He hadn't even reached the rank of Supreme. Jumping down like that, he didn't even know if he'd survive. Why would he do this? Why would he go to such extremes? Suddenly, Xie Lian heard White No-Face sigh. Oh, Shanla, you have a very faithful believer. Before he finished, a cracked, cry-smiling mask abruptly appeared before Xie Lian's eyes. Xie Lian had never expected the White No-Face could actually approach mere inches away in the breath of an instant, and his eyes cleanly reflected its reflection. Rui shot up like it was furious, ready to strike, but in the end, it still shrank back. It couldn't be blamed, since Rui had always been very intelligent. When it determined that its attack would not be effective, it would give up voluntarily. White No-Face seemed to have smiled a bit, since that cry-smiling mask's crack had become deeper. The next second, the blade of a Ming brushed against his neck. But it was late as by a step. The White No-Face had already dodged away. He flashed and appeared on the highest point of where the heaven-crossing bridge ended and slightly lifted his head. No need to be nervous. I was only taking back what was mine. In his hand was a long sword that was completely pitch black and frigid like cold jade. A silver thread crossing down the heart of the blade. Xie Lian subconsciously twisted his hand to feel his back, and sure enough, the Fengshen that was carried on his back was gone. Fengshen was originally the sacred sword of the Crown Prince of Wuyang. The White No-Face had retrieved what had belonged to him. 1 piece, 2 piece, 3 pieces. That tragically pale mask was flaking off 1 piece at a time until finally it thoroughly fell, revealing the face behind the mask. Within the burning flames, that white robe also transformed into white armor. At last, the White No-Face had taken off his mask and transformed into Jun Wu. Everyone held their breath, high on guard. There was no need to guess. In this form, he must be even stronger. I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm fine. We have 1 chapter left. I'm fine. It's fine. I'm spilling coffee everywhere, but I'm fine. The Goshi, chapter 238! Bloody Sunflower, the vicious battle against the White No-Face, part 3! The Goshi shouted towards Hua Cheng, young man, do not underestimate your opponent. His form is now even more difficult to deal with than the White No-Face. Besides, you had the advantage of a better weapon earlier, but not anymore. Sure enough, all of the wounds on Junwoo's body had vanished in one sweep, and he was restored from head to toe. He glanced at the Goshi and smiled. To teach others on how to face me in front of me. I won't kill you, but you're becoming more bold. That smile was laced with a tone of warning. The Goshi stopped speaking but stared back at him. Xie Lian assured, don't worry, Sanlong has never underestimated his opponents. He was even more than clear on this. Even if the smile on Hua Cheng's face was fearless and brazen, his hands would never relax. Junwoo gazed at the sword, speaking softly, Oh, Zushen, long time no see. Fengshen, or rather, it should now be called Zushen, was emitting a deep, quiet moan in his hands. Xie Lian had always thought that Fengshen was too old, so it wasn't easy to use. Who knew if it'd just pass away one day? He had never thought that in the hands of its once master, its aura and power would be completely different than when it was in his own hands. Each time Zushen and Ming clashed, the entire heaven-crossing bridge would shake as if it would collapse and plummet into the lava at any moment. Compared to earlier, Junwoo's strength, force, and speed were distinctly greater. While Hua Cheng still matched its pace, still his brows knitted slightly, and his expression was growing even sharper. The few watching the fight from afar were also stunned and anxious, since every one of Junwoo's strikes were aiming straight for Hua Cheng's right eye. Hua Cheng blocked twice, but both times were alarmingly close. Soon he discovered Junwoo had been repeatedly using the same attack, as if he had been determined the right eye was Hua Cheng's weakness, and he was going to dig for it again. Every time he lunged, naturally Hua Cheng defended with all he had and blocked repeatedly. But with this development, wouldn't they sink into a tug of war with nothing accomplished? It was as if the eye of Ming had sensed danger and was furious. The black jade-like blade came striking again, and there was a crisp clink, and Hua Cheng hadn't raised his saber to parry, but Junwoo had withdrawn his sword. Clad in all white, Xie Lian had blocked in front of Hua Cheng! Earlier, it was his using the force of a rebound to flick away the chilling blade of Zushen. Xie Lian still couldn't sit back after all and had entered the fight. He was skilled in the art of catching the blade with his bare hands, but it was still the first time he'd ever encountered such a malicious sword. With only a light flick, half of his arm was almost numb, especially his palm, the feeling only returning after he backed away a few steps and shook it off. Behind him, Hua Cheng said, Gege, let's do this together, Xie Lian said. The two stood back to back, aiming their will to battle against the other party. Seeing this, Junwoo's smile grew bigger. Oh? Xie Lian said quietly, you take the top and I'll take the bottom. Oh my god, why would you say that right now? No! Ah! MXTX, we are supposed to be in the middle of a battle. You cannot get our minds in the gutter at this point. Would you just stop? Just as his words ended, the two split, one going up and one going down, swiping towards Junwoo. Xie Lian knew fairly well of Junwoo's style of attack and could vaguely guess how he would move next, so he blurted, hook! Hua Cheng followed, and the scimitar made a return. Sure enough, Junwoo almost fell for the trick, and then Xie Lian instructed, blast! Hua Cheng followed again, and this time he didn't use the saber, but used a bare hand to churn his spiritual powers to blast out. Sure enough, Junwoo's shoulder was hit, his figure dipping for a moment. If it wasn't for his wicked speed, those two moves would have probably hit him fatally. As they battled, Xie Lian suddenly snapped to. Hua Cheng was the supreme of their time. With his skill, why would he need Xie Lian's recommendations? What a terrible offense. His old habit had come out, and he quickly apologized. I'm sorry, you don't have to listen to me. Hua Cheng, however, only smiled happily. Everything Gege tells me is the best advice, so why wouldn't I listen? Suddenly, the bridge caved in, and Hua Cheng suddenly lost his footing, looking like he was about to fall. Xie Lian stepped onto the poles of the bridge and cast Rui out, wrapping it around Hua Cheng to pull him back up. The next second, he felt a chill on his neck, and Junwoo had blitzed to his back, resting a hand on his shoulder. Oh, Shanla, good skills. He was too close. and Xie Lian could feel his hair stand. Hua Cheng exclaimed, "Gege!" He flung his left hand, and Ming came flying through the air. Xie Lian reacted incredibly fast, lowering his head, and Ming brushing the top of his head as it flew by, slashing towards Junwu, who was behind him. Only then did Junwu release the hand on his shoulder, and Xie Lian used this chance to leap back to Hua Cheng's side. And Ming boomeranged back to Hua Cheng's hand. The two worked together seamlessly, and those on the side only saw 3 shadows appearing here and there like lightning. So fast it was unimaginable and made one suffocate. Meanwhile, Junwu's laughter resounded overhead throughout the lavacade like he was encouraging. "Oh, good, very good, continue!" Wuxiang strenuously dodged where the bridge was caving in, all the while speaking in horror. "Goshi, is he mental? Why is he laughing?" Goshi said, "I already said, he's worse than mad. He's happy. This is only the beginning." On the other side, having obtained Zushin, Junwu was like a tiger with wings. Xie Lian saw he continuously wielded the sword to attack viciously at Hua Cheng's right eye and felt both terror and alarm. Whipping out Ruyi, Xie Lian tangled the hilt of Zushin, yet unexpectedly Junwu reversed the grip and yanked, and Xie Lian's entire person was flying towards him. Xie Lian was startled at first, but he soon regained calm. He was going to snatch the sword at first anyway, so there was nothing to be scared of, going straight for the blade, his mind playing out hundreds of possible moves that they might exchange in that instant. Yet unexpectedly, halfway through the air, another hand caught him and pulled him back. Xie Lian landed and looked and saw Hua Cheng was shielding in front of him. A black jade sword piercing through his heart! Xie Lian, seeing this picture, he almost passed out, choking, "So long!" Hua Cheng's face was slightly dark. Junwu was still waiting for Xie Lian to impale himself against the blade of Zushin. But seeing that it was blocked, he pulled the sword out and backed off, looking rather disappointed. Xie Lian had completely forgotten that Hua Cheng was a ghost. So even if a giant hole was punched through his chest, he could still jump all around, all lively. Even now, he was still worried, his hands covering over that unbleeding wound on Hua Cheng's chest. "So long, what are you doing? What were you doing so suddenly?" Hua Cheng responded, "As if I'd allow you to be stabbed by it again in front of me." For some reason, his tone was a little over extreme. Xie Lian was slightly taken aback, but Junwu's gentle voice came, "Oh, why do you ache so, Shanla? It's not like you to feel the pain. He's nothing but a deceased man." And he dared to remind Xie Lian of this. Xie Lian whipped his head around to glare at him, his heart ablaze with fury. "And isn't this all your fault?" Junwu, however, sneered, "Is it all my fault?" Having heard this reversed question, Xie Lian was suddenly stumped. Junwu changed the subject. "Perhaps. But Shanla, have you remained in the mortal realm for so long that you've forgotten what you've done? Do you still remember what you did after Shanla had fallen?" A deeply meaningful smile appeared on Junwu's face, and he said slowly, "Do you still remember a ghost named Wu Ming?" Xie Lian's face lost all of its color, and he blurted, "Don't!" Goshi sensed things were going wrong and exclaimed, "Your Highness, what is he saying? And what did you do after Shanla fell?" Xie Lian felt an odd sense of terror, and he looked at Hua Cheng and then at Junwu. What was fury earlier had transformed into uncertainty. Hua Cheng instantly grabbed a hold of him and soothed, with a low voice, "It's fine, Your Highness, don't be afraid." Fengshen also called out, "Yeah, hold steady!" Wuxiang, on the other hand, was sharper. "What did he mean? A ghost? What ghost?" But how could Xie Lian hold steady? Those were the most unkempt days of his life, and he had committed the deed he regretted the most. Even he himself didn't dare to think back on it much. Whenever that pale, crescent-eyed, smiling mask surfaced in his mind, he would suffer no sleep and curl into a ball, desperate for no one to ever see him again. Hua Cheng had seen a Xie Lian basking in glory, had seen a defeated Xie Lian after losing a war, had seen a foolish, silly Xie Lian, had seen an impoverished and beggared Xie Lian. Those were all nothing. But he had probably never seen a Xie Lian who rolled in filthy mud, a Xie Lian who yelled and swore, a Xie Lian full of resentment and hate, a Xie Lian who was set on annihilating the kingdom of Yong'an for revenge, a Xie Lian who would go as far as creating the human face disease for a second time. That period of his life was too obscene to be looked back on. If this was the past, if White No-Face wanted to drag it out, then whatever. But now Xie Lian didn't want to find out what face Hua Cheng would show when he learned that Xie Lian had gone through such a period in his life. Because he wasn't as good as Hua Cheng thought him to be. He wasn't as untainted by filth and saintly and pure. Even if Hua Cheng might only show a sliver of disbelief after learning the fact, Xie Lian would probably never be able to live with himself, and he would never have to face to see Hua Cheng again. The moment he thought of this, Xie Lian's face turned steely pale uncontrollably, cold sweat rolling from his forehead, and his hands trembled. Seeing how he was reacting, Hua Cheng's grip on his hand grew tighter. He said with grave assurance, "Your Highness, don't be afraid. Remember, the one basking in infinite glory is you. The one fallen from grace is also you. What matters is you, not the state of you. No matter what's happened in the past, I will never leave you. You can tell me anything." To end, he added gently, "You told me this yourself." Xie Lian steadied himself slightly, but JUN puffed a laugh and said slowly, "No matter what happened in the past, I will never leave you. My most faithful believers, my friends, they also told me that once." Goshi's face changed, and JUN also swept him a look. But in the end, as you see, no one was able to truly do as they promised. It looked as if the Goshi couldn't bear to look at him anymore and turned away his head. Hua Cheng begged, "Believe me, Your Highness. Won't you?" It's not that Xie Lian wouldn't believe him. It's that he didn't dare to try. In the end, Xie Lian swallowed with difficulty and forced himself to chuckle. And then he felt he shouldn't be laughing and hung his head and his voice trembling. "So long, why don't you? I'm sorry. I might." Hua Cheng gazed at him for a moment and then started, "I actually..." Before he finished, a wave of intense killing intent came lunging, and the two left apart. Sense returned to Xie Lian somewhat, and the color returned to his face. What's with him? Why is he even more faster or stronger? Compared to the form of white no-face before them, JUN's speed had doubled, and his power had doubled, and it was still growing. They could sense very clearly his horrifying surge with every attack. WuXiang also noticed another thing, and he shouted, "Your Highness, be careful! He's changed tactics! He's not attacking the Crimson Rain-sought flower anymore! He's now only attacking you!" Naturally, Xie Lian noticed this. There was only Ruyi in his hand, and when Ruyi saw Fang Xin, it shrank back, unable to attack head-on. Fortunately, Ming had flawlessly blocked every move JUN had used against him. No! We are this close. We are this close to a breakthrough. We are this freaking close! Y'all are gonna have to excuse me while I go freak out for a moment before we come back. Okay, I went, had lunch, screamed a bit, came back, realized that I'm now double fisting coffee and juice, so that's where I'm at. Is this ridiculous? Yes. Is this my favorite chapter set in maybe almost the entire series? Maybe this is one of my favorite chapter sets in the entire series. I can't help it. This is amazing. Volume 8, you're delivering on so many levels. I'm just like, ah. Also, thank God we actually got a picture of this chapter set, because I was like, if we're starting out like volume 7 and there are no pictures and now we don't have a manual update, Romania Black's going to be a little bit unhappy. But we do get a picture update. It is a very appropriate picture. I really like it a lot. It is of WuXiang getting carried on the back of Feng Xin alongside Xie Lian on the bridge as they're escaping at the end of, I guess this is chapter 236 probably, but I love this chapter set so much. I love it so much. At first, I was getting a little bit fired up because I was like, MXTX, if you're gonna make this whole Hua Cheng white no-face battle off screen, I was about to get very upset. I was like, you cannot make this battle off screen. You have to show us something. That is the one thing about Modao Zushi. Modao Zushi, you see all the battles. It's just like, or at least from what I remember, you see most of all the battles. Like, it just happens, right? That's a big thing about Modao Zushi. You can see all the sword fights. It's great, wonderful. In Heaven Official's Blessing, there is some stuff off screen that you're like, but why? But this is the thing. Like, a lot of this story is interpersonal communication. So it's almost like MXTX being like, well, you're not really here for the action, right? And I'm like, you gave us Voltron 2 sets ago. Stop it. So I was very happy to see White No Face and Hua Cheng face off. There's so much to talk about with this chapter set. Where do I even start? I'm just so happy. I am so happy, but this cliffhanger, I'm going to go ahead and tell you, I'm not waiting very long for the next chapter set. I'm going to have to read it. I'm sorry. I have to read the next set. I have to. While I'm in such a giddy mood, it has to happen, right? So that's just how it has to go. That's just how it has to happen. It has to be this way, and I'm sorry. But I'm not going to do it today. As much as I want to I thought about it for a hot second. I was like, do I just go ahead and dive into chapter 239? But no. I'm going to wait. I'm going to wait a second. I'm going to let it go. That's going to be it. But I am going to get into the other chapter set. It has to happen. It has to happen. There's no way around it now. So it's going to have to happen. So that's fun. But it's going to be in a few days because I'm not going to wait a week. There's no way. But I am going to wait a few days, let myself maybe get fired up, calm down, and then dive into this next chapter set. But next week's going to be chapters 239 and 241, so that's fun, whatever that entails. I don't know at this point. I'm assuming, here's the thing. I'm assuming we're getting close. We're at the climax of the battle, I'm assuming, but we're only this far into the novel. So I'm like, we're going to be rounding out this battle very soon. I assume within the next couple of sets, however it ends up happening. And we're so close. We're so close. We're going to talk about it. But I'm like, if we make it even halfway and the battle's over, what's the rest of this? And I have an idea. What I think it's going to be is that the rest of this series, I think it's going to do like Modao Zushi's final volume that I have on the shelf over there. I think that we're going to get halfway through this novel, get to the climax, everything's going to be over, and what I'm fingers crossing for is that the rest of the novel is going to be all the spicy, fun, extra stuff that's going to be coming later. That's going to be great. I'm hoping for that. I don't think we're going to have any incense burner chapters, but we might. Who knows? So that's what I'm hoping for. I'm hoping for most of this novel, if we're getting close to the climax of the battle, that it's going to be the resolution, it's going to be answering any of this that we'll talk about in a second, and then it's going to be spicy extra stuff, which I'm not going to be opposed, because even there's also supposed to be an extra chapter as well when I get through with the novel, so treasures upon treasures that we start out this 2024 with, I'm fine with that. So yes, okay, let's go through this real quick. The ring has not been brought up. Suspiciously. Is it going to get brought up in the next couple of chapters or chapter sets? I don't know. It will be brought up by the end of the novel. I'm sure it's going to be by the end of the novel. I'm sure, right? Who sent the Banyu puppet? Going to be extra stuff, I'm sure, in the rest of the novel. The 500 years and Third Ascension. At this point, I don't know if they're going to mention anything else about it, or if it's just going to be, yeah, those 500 years, that ascension, they happened. Or if that's going to be something that's kind of tackled in the rest of this volume. I don't know. The fetus spirit origin. God, I feel like that has to be addressed by the end of this book. That the 500 years and Third Ascension, if they don't ever address that again, then we can all just speculate and it's fine. The Banyu puppet, I'm sure, will be like a very simple explanation that you'll go, oh, and be like that. But the fetus spirit, I feel like there has to be some explanation. There just has to be. Like, we've built up him enough, and I want to talk about it in this episode, but, you know, the Brocade Immortal with Ling Wen, they've not been present, so I'm sure that's going to come back around. I don't know. Xie Lian's Curse Shackle, they did bring it up in this chapter set, so I think it's going to come up again. Qi and Yin Yu's Curse Shackle, that kind of goes along with Mu Qing's Curse Shackle. I'm sure it's going to be absolved by the end of this. My thing is, are they going to be able to kill JUN / Bai WuXiang? Are they going to kill him? Are they going to, like, banish him? What's going to happen? Are him and Goshi Miao Miao going to go off together? I don't know. My thing is, if they do manage to defeat and kill JUN, does that mean that the curse shackles that were binding Xie Lian, Mu Qing, and Yin Yu, will they all be dissolved? If he's defeated, would it just, like, evaporate? Like, that was the result of it. Could be. I don't know. Could be. I don't know. As far as the Goshi, well, we found the Goshis, so we're going to erase the Goshi from here. We found them. They're now back with the fray. Whatever happens to them. I feel like they're going to stick around. I feel like they're just going to be like an uncle or grandpa that sticks around. They're going to be like, you young whippersnappers, and be whatever. Or maybe not. Maybe they'll run off with Junwoo if Junwoo gets exiled. I don't know. I don't know what Junwoo's fate's going to be. Thundermaster, I'm still holding out. We're going to get something. But it's like down to like 5% at this point. I think the Thundermaster is just a heavenly official that we're not really going to talk about, but I'm going to keep them up there just in case. As soon as I erase them, they'll show up and be a relevant figure, and I'll be like, I wish I'd kept them up there. So we're just going to hold off on it. Feng Xin and Zhanlan, there's got to be closure with them in that fetus spirit. There's just got to be. There's got to be closure there. We're going to talk about it a little bit in this. Mu Qing and the Curse Shackle. Oh my god, Mu Qing. Mu Qing in this chapter said, oh my god. We're going to talk about it. And then Lan Chanshu, I really want Lan Chanshu and Qirong to get some kind of closure. I don't want Qirong to be dead, damn it, but who knows at this point. And then Beef Leaf, I want my Beef Leaf closure. So I'm going to leave this all up here. I have no doubt in my mind we're going to get resolution to all of these points. It's just a matter of time. That's fine. But yeah, so let's talk about this chapter set, because holy shit. What? Y'all. I just, what do you want from me? So yeah, let's talk about this chapter set, because it was amazing. And my dog is like, I have been very patient while you've been freaking out over there. So throw this toy. I'm also slipping on this blanket. So I'm going to wrap this up. It's a nice red blanket to match Hua Cheng in this episode set. So we're just going to push this over here. But yes, so oh my god, where do I start? This chapter set flabbergasted me, and I'm in love with it, and I want to reread it like a million times, and I just, and I'm so mad the cliffhanger is where it is, because I was like, we were just about to get to the, it's happening next week. I know it is. I can feel it in my bones. Just, but whatever. We're going to get to that point and talk about it, but we're not there yet. So, the Heaven Crossing Bridge. I love that the set piece for this final battle is on the bridge, the remnants of the bridge that the Prince of WuXiang created that just was disintegrated. I love it. It is also the idea that below the bridge are all of these like beyond absolving resentful spirits that are just like, they're so evil at this point. They're kind of like Junwoo. They're just beyond saving at this point. They just are like, nope, no more. And, oh my god. They're just trying to kill them. So it's like, I like that Feng Xin yells at him and he's like, hey, you're not going to get to absolve your sins if you keep doing that. And Feng Xin and Mu Qing and Xie Lian are like, yeah, they're kind of beyond that, whatever. This chapter set, it's going to be hard for me to not gush about it and be serious and analytical, because I want to, if this is the chapter set for this week, I want to take it and I want to hug it and I want to be like, you are the best thing in this story so far and I love you. I'm almost speechless at how good it is, but we're gonna get to it, right? But being on the bridge, the Heaven Crossing Bridge, and Mu Qing noting that San Long is not present, that they were transported to this bridge. Now, we know that Feng Xin was left up top and decided to come down being like, well, screw you guys, leave me up here. I should have realized that, because Feng Xin's not one person to stick around, right? Is he codependent upon Mu Qing and Xie Lian? Feng Xin likes to be around people, right? Feng Xin was also acting a little bit weird at one point, so I was like, wait a minute. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Like, some of his mannerisms, I was like, these are kind of like Qirong's. Has he always been kind of like Qirong? Especially when he said this ancestor. I maybe want to go back and see if that part is, does he say that in the book? Does he say this ancestor? Because they talk about him getting off of the bridge and him yelling at the people and swearing. And he said, yeah, this ancestor can blow all of you away with one hand. I'm like, Qirong is the only person I know of that could say this ancestor. So I'm like, has Qirong possessed Feng Xin for the time being? And did he possess him and go down in there? What's going on? That part's weird to me. Do I think that Qirong has possessed Feng Xin? Not really, but it's very ironic that Function is cursing and talking a lot like Shirong. And even Xie Lian curses at one point, which is hilarious to me. I was like, oh my god. But anyway, so it would make sense that Bai WuXiang is like, okay, WuXiang and Xie Lian, transport them to this bridge while I fight Hua Cheng. And I feel as if Bai WuXiang / Jun Woo was anticipating WuXiang just being there as a distraction for Xie Lian. I think that Bai WuXiang doesn't want to kill Xie Lian. They're weirdly obsessed with them. But I feel like they didn't kill WuXiang because WuXiang would just be an infinite distraction for Xie Lian while they were facing, Hua Cheng. And Bai WuXiang / Jun Woo knows that WuXiang is not a threat. So that's kind of why they left WuXiang around. But surprising them, Xie Lian has gotten a lot better at communication over the course of this damn novel, and I'm so proud of him. And he was like, no, let's talk this out. I'm so in awe with Xie Lian because WuXiang is like, you were so suspicious of me. And then Xie Lian's like, no, I knew you weren't lying. I'm believing in you. And that, I was like, bring Whiteboard Kun out here. But the idea of Xie Lian in the past versus now. And the Xie Lian of the past would keep things to himself. Like we've seen it time and time again in the previous flashback arcs where Xie Lian wouldn't talk to Function and WuXiang. He would internally monologue all of it, and we, the audience, would see how much it was hurting Xie Lian inside and how much he was just like tearing away at himself to the point where it led to him being kind of like Bai WuXiang. And we've seen all these things versus him being around Hua Cheng and Hua Cheng being like, no, just come out and say it. Like, I love that throughout the course of this story, Hua Cheng and others have kind of encouraged Xie Lian, whether they've been cognizant of it or not, they've been encouraging Xie Lian to speak more about his feelings and be more honest with himself to others. And so now he just comes out and tells WuXiang his thoughts. And he's like, hey, he's like, look, this is how I feel about you. And I know that you're not lying. He's like, I know you're a good person. And I love that Xie Lian's honest. He's like, you've made some decisions that have made me want to hurt you. He's like, when we were on that mountain and you were siding with those heavenly officials, I wanted to punch you to death because I'm so mad at you. He's like, but that was all in the past. And he's like, I know how you are. And he's like, you're weird. He's like, you're odd, but you're not as malicious as you think people think that you are. He's like, you're not as bad as you believe people perceive you to be. And he's like, and I know that, and you know that, and you know how I am. And he's like, so, he's like, it's over. I'm not burning bridges with you. I'm just going to say, I know how it was back then. I was mad then. 800 years have passed, and I've gotten over it. So, let's just keep going with our friendship. And it's just so good, right? And WuXiang, struggling to kind of comes to terms with that someone can be so honest, and also know that Bai WuXiang / Jun Woo told WuXiang that that's not how it was going to be. He told WuXiang that Xie Lian was not going to believe in him, that Xie Lian was going to turn him away, that Xie Lian was going to be mad and resentful to him, because that's how Bai WuXiang and Jun Woo are. They are resentful, and they hold grudges, and they won't let it go that people were mean to them back then and didn't believe in them back then, and now they're just trying to project all that on everybody else. But like Hua Cheng has said, Xie Lian is not like them. And so they can't understand that Xie Lian is a better person than they are, and Xie Lian hasn't held these grudges. And I also like that Xie Lian came out and said that he was mad at WuXiang and he did want to hurt him. I'm not condoning violence, but I'm glad that Xie Lian was honest. It was like, yeah, I was pissed off, and I was really mad. But if it comes down to me saving you, of course I'm going to save you. Just because I wanted to punch you doesn't mean you deserve to die. That's huge. And WuXiang just being like, WuXiang doesn't know what to do with that, right? Because that's not what he was told, right? And so then I love the idea that Xie Lian has been carrying him on piggyback, and all of these moments with the last chapter set and this chapter set of Xie Lian offering to pick WuXiang up and not thinking a thing about it. And WuXiang just being like, why would you do this for someone like me? And Xie Lian's like, because you're my friend and you don't deserve, to be killed. That's why. And I love that. And I thought Muqing was going to die in this chapter set. I really did. I thought Muqing was going to die. I thought he was going to sacrifice himself, and that was going to be the end of his character. And I was like, I've not really liked Muqing this whole story, but after this chapter set, I'm like, I don't want him to die. He doesn't deserve it. And that's the point. That's kind of the point of his character. And now it kind of makes sense when everybody has been telling me throughout the comments. I've been like, let me figure it out, guys. And everybody's been like, well, Muqing's not that bad. And no, he's not. He's been annoying this whole story, for sure, because of how not communicating well he's been doing. But when it all comes out in the open, it's like, no, Muqing's just weird. Like Xie Lian, like Function, like everybody in this story, they're just weird. But they're their own kind of weird, and Xie Lian knows that, and he still loves him. He's like, you're still my bro. We're still friends. And Muqing, I'm so glad he didn't die in this chapter set, because I want him to, now that he knows that Xie Lian cares about him, and now that he's starting to like bridge this relationship back together, I want him to keep doing so with both Xie Lian and Function. I want that. I'm like, oh, I'm so glad he didn't die. But I thought he was going to for a second. I was going to be like, no, we've had too many characters nearly die or possibly die. We don't need any more. No. So yeah, I love the idea. I do think it's creepy that Xie Lian knows about the people of WuXiang not being absolved. And Muqing's like, how do you know all this? And Xie Lian's like, well, it was probably JUN that told me through the corpse-eating rats. It's like, ugh. And then Muqing's speech. Oh my God. I love it. I love that he's like, I was told that you weren't going to have this kindness to me. He's like, I was told that you weren't going to believe in me. And it's so beautiful. And he's like, long story short, I just wanted to be your friend. And he's like, I very much wanted to become your friend. It's like, oh. But I'm also glad, like, what I love about this, like, patching up friendship scene that happens in this chapter, the first two chapters with Function and Muqing and Xie Lian, is that it's so genuine and heartfelt that it doesn't feel forced. It feels real. Like Muqing's like, I could possibly die. So now that I'm faced with certain death, I might as well just come out and say everything I think about you. And I'm like, thank God. Because that's what I was afraid of. I was afraid that Xie Lian and Muqing and Function would never actually come to terms with all of this, because there's been like centuries and centuries of bottled up emotions and things left unsaid and people not being honest with one another, and he said this, she said this, and now I'm like, Muqing's just like, no, here's the deal. Muqing's like, I'm jealous of you. I think I'm just as good as you. I think that you've just gotten off easy because you were born as the prince. He's like, I think people praise you too much. And it's like, okay, just tell us like it is, Muqing. And I love that he says, to be honest, he's like, I probably will not change the way that I feel about you. He's like, and so when he was saying that, he's like, I'm probably never going to stop believing that you believe that you enjoy this praise and flattery and that you think so highly of yourself. He's like, it'll just keep resurfacing. He's like, that's my bad habit. That's my bad toxic trait that I myself have. I'm going to be jealous and tell myself these things about yourself, even if they're not true. And I'm so glad Muqing airs this and just says it, because it's very human. It's very relatable. I get jealous a lot very easily, and I'm very aware of it. And I try to rein it in and be subconscious and transparent about it, that I get jealous a lot. And I'm like, I know I'm like this. And I kind of relate to Muqing in this moment, being like, oh no, I know what that's like. And even when you have no reason to be jealous, it just happens sometimes. And you're like, oh, this sucks. Why am I like this? And you kind of understand that toxic trait within yourself. I think we all have a toxic trait. And sometimes people don't want to recognize that toxic trait. And they're like, no, I'm fine. And I'm like, if you have to tell yourself you're fine, you are very much not fine. But I feel like sometimes we don't want to admit that we have flaws, or that we have, because we're afraid people will think less of us if we admit our flaws. And so I really respect Muqing for just coming out and saying it and just being like, look. And when he said that, he's like, there's gonna be a time that will resurface, I thought he was just gonna jump in the lava. And Xie Lian's like, why are you telling me all this? And he's like, but I'm still in awe of you. He's like, even after all of that, I still am in awe of you. And I'm like, when did Muqing become this secret rival of Xie Lian's this whole time, right? What's so fascinating about this part of the story is that it's like, Muqing almost, this speech comes off like Bakugo talking to Deku in My Hero Academia. And you're like, but Muqing's not been in this story, like, in that capacity. So it's just like, what? But I love it. And then he's like, I still owe you an apology. And Xie Lian's like, oh, well, it's been 800 years. Bygones be bygones. Let's get out of here first. And that's when he says, he told me if I was suspicious, then even if you knew I didn't do it, you'd still go with the flow and not save me because you hate me and you wouldn't believe in me. And I'm like, that is also, for JunWoo / Bai WuXiang to say that, like, excuse me, bitch, you don't know Xie Lian, get out of here. I feel like I'm becoming Hua Cheng and channeling him, being like, you don't know my man. I was like, oh, how dare. I'm like, because we, the audience, know that Xie Lian doesn't believe like that. He doesn't think like that. He's not resentful like JunWoo is. And he's like, even though I didn't agree to help him, everything he said, I thought it too. And deep down, I thought always that you hated me, despised me, and you don't actually think that, and I'm glad. And I love that that's the point where I thought he was going to die. I was like, oh no, WuXiang said all this, and it very much felt like the last words you'd say to somebody before you jump to your doom. You're like, well, as I'm dying, I'm glad to know that that guy was wrong. You actually are a nice person, even if I think you're trash. So, bye. And I was like, no! And thank God. Xie Lian's like, don't you run away. And I love Function coming in to save them. I'm like, oh, the trio. This chapter set being called The Three Idiots. Yes, it's like, because you have WuXiang and Function who have fought tooth and nail this entire time, who haven't been communicating properly with themselves or Xie Lian. And then you have Xie Lian who's just kind of in the middle going, I don't know what to do. And I have this picture up here on the wall that Couscous sent me that is of WuXiang and Function like looking at each other with like little scraggly lines, and Xie Lian's like, huh. And that's the three idiots. It's like the three mountain spirits, the three idiots, which is hilarious because you have the three of them in the Goshi and JunWoo. It's just all, it's hilarious. I absolutely loved it. It's great. And then I just love the idea of WuXiang standing up for himself and trying to clean out the trash by fighting the spirits, and then actually doing decently well. For having a cursed shackle on his arm, he's not doing too bad. He definitely has more than Xie Lian in terms of spirit energy, but Xie Lian has 2 shackles, so there you go. And then Function. I love that Xie Lian's like, you can't just die now that you're saying something sensible for the first time in your life. And I was like, yes, I agree. And I love WuXiang's like, what do you mean finally something sensible? I just love that. And WuXiang was going to kill himself rather than die in the lava, which is in character. But I love that Xie Lian keeps being like, wait, I've got a plan. And he's like, we better come up with it soon. And then Function comes in and saves him. It's great. I love it so much. And I love, he's like, my favorite line in that whole chapter was Function being like, F your entire family. And Xie Lian's like, well, if their entire family looks like that, are you sure you want to fuck them? It's like, Xie Lian! I'm like, oh my God. Like the humor and levity throughout this set is another reason I love it. It's just like, I don't know. And I love that at this point, Xie Lian has been influenced by Qirong and Function so much that he starts cursing and he doesn't think anything about it, and Function is just being himself and WuXiang's being himself. Like it's like they don't put on airs anymore. They're not trying to like put up any walls or pretense. They're just being themselves. And it's so good to see the three of them together again like this, like being friends and mending these relationships. And I'm like, it's a weird time to be doing it, but okay. And I love that MXTX does that in the middle of this battle, because normally that sort of stuff would be saved for like the resolution and like the falling action at the end of the climax. And MXTX is like, no, let's solve it right now. And I'm like, okay. It's great. And so then they come, and I like that WuXiang said he was dragged down, and Function's like, and Xie Lian's like, we'll just go with it. Let's go. And so, oh my God, I love that they argue while they're on piggyback, like the image in the book. And then as they're going along, now WuXiang, this whole moment where WuXiang is like, look, are you sure that Hua Cheng is alive still? He's like WuXiang, I like that Function is always trying to put on airs of not wanting, he's like the friend that's like, hey, I don't want to say it, but maybe there's something wrong. And WuXiang's that one friend that's like, look, let's cut the bullshit. Could he be dead? Like, I love that they have that dynamic with Xie Lian, right? And Xie Lian loves them both, so it's fine. But Xie Lian's like, please help me find Sun Long. So we get to chapter 236. And I love that Xie Lian's like, it's been a long time since we've done stuff like this. And they're like, oh, do you mean fighting or running for our lives? And Xie Lian's like, both. He's like, oh, it's great. But they can tell that Xie Lian is troubled because he's trying to find Hua Cheng. And the point where WuXiang is like, you really like him, don't you? I love that WuXiang is having the conversation with Xie Lian, being like, you really love him, don't you? And then meanwhile, a few chapters back, Feng Shen was like, so you really like His Highness, don't you? To Hua Cheng, like, the two best friends are feeling out, you know, Xie Lian and Hua Cheng to be like, you guys really like each other, huh? This actually kind of works, huh? Like, I just love that because they're going to be together. So I don't know how they're defeating Junwoo. I don't know how they're doing it, but they're going to do it together and then they're going to be together. So if you're the best friends, you might as well accept it because otherwise you're going to have to deal with it. Either way. But I just love WuXiang asking him this and Xie Lian's like, huh? And Xie Lian's ears turning red and WuXiang's like, okay. And he's like, and that's when he's like, are you ready? I don't want to bring this up since you like him, but he could be dead. I kept waiting for Xie Lian to see if he could see the red string on his finger because that's always been his sign of telling that Hua Cheng's there or not. And so far, he hasn't done it yet, but then they find Hua Cheng, so it doesn't matter. But I kept thinking, like, Xie Lian, if you just look down at your hand, you'll notice the red string. You won't have to feel so unease, right? But, and then that's when they find the fragments of the butterflies. I would love to see Star Ember draw the three of them showing up on the bridge, and there's just like, all I imagined in my head was that time was standing still and there were just these little floating bits of silver butterflies just like stuck frozen in midair and just kind of like wafting there. It felt very Harry Potter. It felt very magical, like them just kind of like floating in the air, but it being like floating ashes is what I was imagining in my head, like little silver floating ashes, and they're just remnants of butterflies. And then Xie Lian picks up the one. I imagine the one that he picks up is like the little silver butterfly from the Dongwall right now, where he was like, oh, how cute. I feel like it's that one. I'm going to add that headcanon in there to make you all even angstier that it was like the one butterfly he touched back when Hua Cheng took him away to go see Qirong the first time. That's the butterfly fragment that's in the air. Have that in your head the rest of the series. But yeah, the fact that we see Ming like slicing against the stone, and Xie Lian points out that normally Hua Cheng is so at ease when he fights because nothing's a threat. But Bai WuXiang, who is now seemingly combined with Junwoo, they've all combined back together into one being, terrifying, is all together now to fight them. So yeah, it's Junwoo, it's Bai WuXiang all together now. And the Prince of Wuyang, they're like all three together as one being, which is terrifying to fight against. But when they were talking about seeing Ming's blades, I was afraid that we weren't going to get to see the battle. And I was like, MXTX, if you do this entire battle off screen, I'm going to be mad. Luckily, that's not the case. And then I love that Feng Shen is like, this better be Hua Cheng or Xie Lian is going to go absolutely apeshit. And then WuXiang's like, well, there's nobody else to pray to, so we better hope that it is right now. I love it. And just Feng Shen and WuXiang seeing Xie Lian stumbling and falling and being so like head over heels worried for Hua Cheng. I don't know if I'm ready to see that animated, but my heart was breaking for Xie Lian throughout this entire chapter. I almost cried at the end there. I was like, no, oh my God, don't. Now's not the time. Especially when they left that cliffhanger. I was like, well, now I'm just amped up on adrenaline, so screw that. But yeah. And then we find Hua Cheng. I cannot wait to see this animated. I can't wait to see it illustrated. I need it. I can't wait to see it in the live action. Seeing them fight, and the mask is like cracked down the middle, like it's about to crack there, and Hua Cheng is fighting. And because what did it say? It said that there's some random sword that Bai WuXiang was using to fight against Ming. And then, of course, he gets Zushin back, which we'll talk about that. But then everybody just sitting there watching in panic, and the Goshi's just like, shit, my ex is fighting my future grandson-in-law. What do we do? Ah! But yes, and then of course, what I was really afraid of was at the moment that Hua Cheng saw Xie Lian and was like, oh, Gege, I was thought that like Bai WuXiang would kill Hua Cheng or mortally wound him or something. I was like, do not do this story, do not. But that's not what happens. No. Instead, Ming goes after Hua Cheng, or Yiming goes after Bai WuXiang. And then I love how just cocky and arrogant Hua Cheng is. He's like, no. He's like, what do I have to care for the likes of you? And I love the go. She's like, young man, don't be so cocky. My former bae is pretty strong. I also feel like the Goshi throughout this entire battle is terrified that Junwoo is going to die, because that is like, I'm fully on the Mei Nianqing and Junwoo ship. Fully on it. Like, y'all in the Discord kind of influenced it, but now I'm fully on it. And I'm like, I feel like he's worried that someone he loves is going to die to Hua Cheng's hands, but he doesn't want Hua Cheng and Xie Lian to die, so it's like, poor Mei Nianqing's in this damned if you do, damned if you don't scenario. But, and then I love that Function and WuXiang are like, Hua Cheng is pretty gutsy to say this to Junwoo / Bai WuXiang's face, but Hua Cheng is like, I have Xie Lian on my side, I'm fine. I'm like, So, yes. And so that's when WuXiang says, no wonder they said when it comes to Hua Cheng, avoid him and don't face him head on. Which also, I feel like Junwoo did not want anyone around Hua Cheng, because Hua Cheng's not afraid of Junwoo. He's like, you're not anything I should be afraid of. I have Xie Lian. He's the glory in all glories. Like, why do I need to fear you? And I feel like Junwoo has had such a controlling presence over the heavenly realm that if the heavenly officials started being around Hua Cheng and Hua Cheng was like, well, who cares for that guy? He's not that tough. Then that would take some of the control away that Junwoo had built up over all this time. And Junwoo was like, oh, I don't want that. So they just wanted him to stay away. But I love that So the fetus spirit. Can we talk about the fetus spirit for a hot second? It gets in the way of the fight between Hua Cheng and Junwoo. So, to me, that raises some questions. One being, do I think that Function is the father of So-So? Yes. But do I think that Bai WuXiang / Junwoo is the father of the fetus spirit? I think that Bai WuXiang / Junwoo is the reason the fetus spirit is in existence. I think that he created the fetus spirit because it serves him and it's like a little puppy dog to him. And I think that the part that hates Function is the part of the fetus spirit that's like it's the part of him that's denying Function's involvement in all of it. That's just my theory. I think that's what it is. But I like that WuXiang is like, have you ever taken it for your son? Have you ever called it its name properly? And Function's like, So, I mean, Function is never really he calls it an it, right? He says, when it sees me, it sticks on. When it sees me, it bites. And WuXiang's like, can you just acknowledge that it's your kid? Or if you're going to acknowledge it, that's your kid. That's why it doesn't like you. Because you're not addressing it as him or your son or by his name. So I'm hoping that Function does that by the end. But I think that Junwoo is the reason that the fetus spirit exists. I could be wrong, but that's just my theory. I think Junwoo is the one that created the fetus spirit for whatever reason, out of spite against Function because he was with Xie Lian or whatever the case may have been. I think that's what happened, but we'll probably find out by the end of the series. Probably. But yeah, and then of course, Junwoo gets hurt and has blood all his hands down his hand. Junwoo does because of Hua Cheng's attack. And the Goshi's like, no, he's worse than angry. He's happy. It's one of those, like, it's the cry smiling mask. It's like you didn't know whether to laugh or to cry. And so instead he chose to laugh because it's just pure madness at this point. And the Goshi's like, yeah, this is not good. Like, he's enjoying this way too much. Like, I don't know how to feel about this. And then that's when the white no-face says, your scimitar was forged by that missing eye of yours, wasn't it? Now, this story, y'all, we're going to go back to the story because I was internally screaming, freaking out, being like, are you freaking kidding me, MXTX? Are you joking? Because this brings up, like, this could be how he destroys Junwoo, right? So we need to acknowledge this. From here on, we need to talk about this seriously because this is a big deal. It's a big deal. But him saying that at Mount Tonglu years ago, there were all of these vicious ghosts that were paying a tribute. And I love that WuXiang is like, he's like many hundreds of years ago, there was a vicious ghost that came to Mount Tonglu. I love that it says that like hundreds of years ago, right? it came to Mount Tonglu. And that was, as far as we know, it was Wu Ming once he had like dissipated after battling Bai WuXiang and the human face disease. It was when Wu Ming had dissipated after the battle with Bai WuXiang and the human face disease, he went to Mount Tonglu. Right? I love that WuXiang is like, well, you know, there's lots of times millions of ghosts, and he's like, don't interrupt. I love the ghost. She's like, be quiet. I love the ghost. She still has some animosity towards WuXiang, and he's like, just shut up and let me tell my story. He's like, I've been stuck away from an audience for hundreds of years. Can't you let me have this? And so he's like, it took the time, that vicious ghost, the time it took to form was very short. It was very young, and it was almost ready to dissipate completely, but it held on and drifted here. And he said, and so, because Goshi would know, because he was there, and Xie Lian's like, it almost dissipated. How come? I feel like Xie Lian knows it. Xie Lian's heart knows that all this is connected, but his heart and his mind aren't matching up. And I was like, I thought that Hua Cheng was going to tell him this chapter set, and he didn't. And I was like, come on, you are so close. But Xie Lian knows, I think, in his heart that it's always been Hua Cheng, but his mind just isn't willing to connect all the dots because of what we'll talk about in a minute. But he's like, it suffered great damage, which means it was all scattered. And it wasn't very conscient, but it floated along, repeating that it wouldn't leave. It wouldn't leave because its wish hadn't been fulfilled, right? So the idea that Hua Cheng said it wouldn't leave until it could come back strong enough to protect Xie Lian. He was going to keep coming back no matter what. Which explains why it took him so long to get back. But then this accident. So, not only did millions of ghosts gather, but there's a group of live mortals who were accidentally locked inside. And then they went with that vicious ghost, and he took the large group under its wing and fled for days. And then there was a way to break away to safety, and it was to forge a blood weapon and to kill and break the siege. And so we think in our heads that Ming was going to be made from the humans, that they were going to be sacrificed because that's the blood ritual that would have been happening, right? And the symbolism of this, that instead it was his left eye. I mean, we've debated for a long time that the eye was Ming. I mean, everybody in the Discord pretty much confirmed it. They're like, oh. And so, but that's been kind of like, it doesn't take much to know that that's the left eye that's missing. It's in the sword. It came from him. He took it out and made the sword himself. That part wasn't surprising. The part that was surprising was the fact that he had the opportunity to forego sacrificing his own eye, and he could have just used the humans, but he chose not to. And that goes back to the story at the very beginning where they're like, I heard that Hua Cheng was the person who went so mad they dug out their own eye. And I was like, yes, that's true too. So we find out that a lot of the stories that have been told, probably because the people that were spared spread those stories, told about them, and that's what caused the rumors of Hua Cheng to get spread, right? Of the Crimson Rain Sought Flower. So that all makes sense. That all ties back to everything. But it's also such a parallel to JUN, who, in a fit of madness, instead of sacrificing part of themselves, sacrificed the humans. And sacrificed their friends to make, they ended up with the faces on his, face from them. It's just like, instead of JUN, who sacrificed humans in a fit to try and rectify a situation, instead of going down that same path that JUN did, Hua Cheng decided, no, Xie Lian's been trying to save people. I'm going to be like him, and I'm going to sacrifice part of myself instead because I believe that much in me. And then who knows what kind of wicked device forged that it actually carried into battle. And then this incident happened. The heavens sent forth a heavenly calamity, and it struck straight into Mount Tonglu. So if a heavenly calamity is sent forth, it means the heavens believed there's someone worthy to ascend. And he's like, this is all hearsay. But there wasn't any heavenly officials in the upper court that came from Mount Tonglu. Either what I heard was purely fabricated, or the one who ascended jumped back down and rejected the heavenly realm. So, what we're is that Hua Cheng ascended. He's ascended. He was a ghost that had the opportunity to ascend and become a heavenly official, become a god, and he rejected it and went back down to do that. And then WuXiang's like, well, to ascend as a ghost, how could that be? And to refuse and go back to Mount Tonglu, well, there's no way. He just entered Mount Tonglu. He hadn't even reached the rank of a supreme. You know, he didn't even know if he'd survive. Why did he do this? Why would he go to such extremes? And then that's when the white no-face says, you are a very faithful believer. So, what we're implying here is that in that moment, Hua Cheng was offered ascension as a ghost. Because that we've established that the ideas of ascension, they're not controlled by Junwu. The fact of whether you ascend or not is not controlled by Junwu. That is fate in itself. Junwu just rules the court that you go to when you do ascend, but you don't get to control that. But he was offered ascension, and he rejected and went back to become a supreme ghost king to protect Xie Lian. He turned down the ascension to protect Xie Lian. That's basically it. That's all. That's all. Because if he had ascended and became a heavenly official, one, he would have been under the watch of Junwu, which, no, that wouldn't have been good. And two, he would have ended up in the heavenly realm along with all these other heavenly officials that he hates because they've been so awful to Xie Lian. And plus, Xie Lian wouldn't have been there because he's been banished. So of course Hua Cheng would say no. Of course he would. But who? No other heavenly official has ever said no and rejected the ascension. So the big question at this point is Hua Cheng both a god and a ghost king at the same time? That would make a lot of sense considering how strong he is. And plus, that kind of also parallels Junwu, who is both a god and a ghost king. So it's like, yeah, and just, and they both love Xie Lian, but Junwu's love is toxic and wrong, and Hua Cheng's is pure and beautiful, and it's like, when these chapters, I was like, are you freaking kidding me? That he had. So the question is if that was possible, he could reject it once. Could it happen again? Is Hua Cheng fighting Junwu? Is Junwu going to try? Because he just stabbed him in the heart, right? He just stabbed him in the heart. Is Hua Cheng going to possibly get the option to ascend again? If it can happen to Xie Lian, here's my thing. We're going to talk about it here in a second, but when, in more detail, but I have to say it now, when Xie Lian was about to be like, Hua Cheng, if Hua Cheng knew this about me, he wouldn't love me. He wouldn't care about me. I can't possibly stand the fact of him possibly. And we're just sitting here like, he already knows. But my thing is, in the next chapter set, is Hua Cheng going to be like, look, I know. I've been here all along. And I'm still following you because I believe in you. And if Xie Lian says, I believe in you back, is that going to cause like, is he going to ascend? Is it going to cause an ascension? Could it happen again? Because if Xie Lian and Hua Cheng believe in each other, Xie Lian's already ascended again. He's already ascended again. But could Hua Cheng again? And if they both do together, what do we do with that? This is why I can't wait. Because I need to know. I need to know these answers. Anyway. So the cry smiling mask, he takes back. I love that he just jumps in front of Xie Lian, and Rui's like, oh no. Rui's like, I know not to mess with him. He's the one that started this whole jam. And I love that he took Fang Xin and transformed Fang Xin back into his sword. And it was the sacred sword of the Prince of Wuyang. Makes sense. And then he's like, Zhu Xin's back. And then the mask breaks off and it's his face underneath. Oh my God. And then we get to the last chapter of this set. And I love that Goshi's like, do not underestimate him, because now all his powers come back. He's in his final form. All the forms have converged. What's funny is there's the three faces of the friends. There are the three forms, the Crown Prince of Wuyang, Bai WuXiang, and Junwu, that are all back together under this facade. It's insane. And I love Xie Lian being like, don't worry, Sun Long has never underestimated his opponents. I do think one of my favorite moments is when Junwu is like, Zhu Xin, long time no see. Oh my God, I love that moment. It's just like, love that now it's like there's this creepy softness to Junwoo because he's formed back with Bai WuXiang, and it's like, what do we do with this? And then just the clashing of Zushin, this black blade, with Ming, this white silver blade. Ah, I love it. Everything about this entire last chapter is just poetry to me. Them just fighting each other. And then, because Xie Lian is worried, he jumps in the fray. And I like that it nearly takes his arm off, just flinging the sword away from Junwoo. But Hua Cheng's like, Gege, and he's like, let's do this together. And that's the thing, because Junwoo's always been alone. He's been trying to get Xie Lian alone and convincing Xie Lian that he can only be alone. And Xie Lian's like, no, I have Hua Cheng beside me. We're going to do it together because we're together in this. And it's like, just, oh my God. And then, well, okay, when Xie Lian said, you take the top and I'll take the bottom, please tell me I wasn't the only one thinking it. Please tell me I was not the only one thinking that Xie Lian was confirming what their sexual positions were going to be. Please tell me I'm not the only one. I can't be the only one. He could have said, you take his head and I'll take his waist. Could have said that. Could have said that, but he didn't. I was like, oh my God, Xie Lian. Sorry. It's just how it is. Just how it is. But yeah, his words ended, the two split, and one went up and one went down, and they're swiping towards Junwoo. And I just love how they work together in all of this. And Xie Lian, I love that Xie Lian realizes, he's like, oh my God, I'm trying to lecture Hua Cheng on what to do in battle because I'm so used to not working with somebody on the same level as me. And so he's like, oh, sorry, you don't have to listen to me. And then Hua Cheng's like, well, everything you say is the best advice, so why wouldn't I listen? I'm like, you two are flirting in the middle of this life or death battle, and the Goshi's just sitting here like, what do I do? I guess I can't even help it at this point, can I? And then, just when you think that it's just so creepy, like, Junwoo comes over and he's like, Shanla, you have such good skills. And Hua Cheng's like, get away from him! He, like, uses Rui and he, like, gets him back from him while using him being, like, a boomerang. I love that it's just, like, kind of this back and forth where Junwoo wants to grab Xie Lian and Xie Lian gets taken back by Hua Cheng. And then, Junwoo just getting, like, more and more into the battle, being like, continue. And Muqing's like, is he mental? And Goshi's like, he's worse than mad, he's happy. And this is just the beginning. Like, he's just gone insane. And he's just enjoying this battle too much. And the Goshi's like, when he gets like this is a bad thing. But the thing about it is, I love they describe him as a tiger with wings. And Xie Lian saw him wielding the sword to attack at Hua Cheng's right eye. And he was worried. And then suddenly Junwoo, like, grabbed Xie Lian, like Xie Lian was going to be taken towards him. And Hua Cheng suddenly shielded in front of him. And the thing about it is that Junwoo was going to stab Xie Lian, but I think he knew that Hua Cheng was going to get in the middle of him. So it's just like he's torturing them at this point. He knew that Hua Cheng wasn't going to die getting stabbed with the sword, and he was going to do it to Xie Lian just to torment him. And Hua Cheng was like, no. He's like, you're not going to get stabbed by that sword in front of me ever again. And the thing about it is, yes, the thing about it is that's it. That's Zushin is the same sword that was given to Xie Lian all those years ago. They took with him. It's the same damn sword that stabbed him 100 times by all those people in the temple. Hua Cheng knows about that. And he's just like, no. He's like, I'm never saying you stabbed again. I would rather be stabbed 100 times than seeing you get stabbed. And at that point, I was like, is this a feat impressive enough? Now that we know that Hua Cheng can ascend, he has the aura, he has the range. Could it happen again? And Xie Lian being taken aback, he's like, why do you ache so, Shanla? It's not like you'd feel pain. He's nothing but a deceased man. And I love that Xie Lian gets so mad about that. He's like, don't remind me that he's a ghost. How dare you? And then Xie Lian's like, well, it's all your fault. And he's like, oh, is it my fault? And then he starts reminding Xie Lian about what happened after Shanla fell and said, do you remember a ghost named Wu Ming? And the thing about it is he's like, don't remind me about Wu Ming. And the Goshi's like, what happened after Shanla fell? So the Goshi doesn't know everything. He doesn't know exactly what all went down. And I like that he looks at Hua Cheng And what was fury earlier, I transformed to uncertainty. And Hua Cheng grabbed him and says, "It's fine, don't be afraid. It's fine, Your Highness, don't be afraid." And I like that Feng Xin is like, "Yeah, hold steady. Do what Hua Cheng says. He's got you. It's all right." And Mu Qing's like, "What ghost? Explain what's going on." I love that Feng Xin in this moment is like, "That's right, Hua Cheng, Xie Lian. You guys will make it through anything. It's okay." And Mu Qing's like, "I want to know the gossip." Mu Qing's like, "Spill the tea, damn it." But this part here, I wanted to cry because Xie Lian knows at this point, he's like, he knows that Hua Cheng has been there when he caught him off the wall. He knows that Hua Cheng has been there when he was a prince. He knows that he's seen Xie Lian losing the war with Yang En. He's seen foolish, silly Xie Lian, and he describes it as an impoverished beggar. He's like, that's fine. But he thinks, he doesn't realize that Hua Cheng was the little ghost fire that saw him in the mud and saw him yelling and swearing. He doesn't know that Hua Cheng, or here's the thing, he doesn't want to believe that Hua Cheng was that little ghost fire. He doesn't want to believe that Hua Cheng was Wu Ming, because in Xie Lian's eyes, he's like, who could look at me when I was at my worst like that and still think that I'm as pure and saintly when they know I'm not? And he's like, even if Hua Cheng might only show a sliver of disbelief after learning about it, Xie Lian could never live with himself and never face to see Hua Cheng again. But I'm like, Xie Lian, he's seen you at your worst. He's seen you. And this whole time I was like, Hua Cheng, you've got to tell him. Tell him that you've already seen it, that it's been you this whole time, that you've seen him like this. And it's okay. I was just waiting for that. And it just, And that's when Hua Cheng is like, look, don't be afraid. He's like, the one who's fallen from grace is also you. What matters is you and not the state of you. No matter what has happened in the past, I will never leave you and you can tell me anything. And that part just kills me because I'm like, Hua Cheng could say that it's him. Hua Cheng could say that he's been there the whole time. He could do that to Xie Lian. But he's like, no, I trust you that whenever you're ready, you'll tell me and it'll be okay. And then Xie Lian, and then, oh my God, Junwoo saying, no matter what happened in the past, I'll never leave you. The way he mocks him, he's like, my most faithful believers, my friends, they also told me that once too. And that moment when he looked down at Goshi and was like, they all left. They didn't fulfill their promises. And the Goshi's like, I'm right here. Like, right in front of my salad, you know? But the fact that Junwoo mocks him like that, oh my God. But but you know what? Junwoo, Xie Lian is not you. And Junwoo, it sucks that your friends did that to you, but Hua Cheng's not your friends. He's different. And then Hua Cheng is like, believe me, Your Highness, won't you? And Xie Lian, it's not like that he wouldn't believe him. It's that he didn't dare to try. And I want Xie Lian to try. I want him to believe him. I do. I think that's the missing puzzle piece. That's all we need, is for him to believe in him, and then it'll be okay. That's all we need. Oh my God. That's all we need. And I'm just like, oh my God, Xie Lian. And it's like, I'm sorry. I might. When he says, I'm sorry, I might. And Hua Cheng is like, I actually. And then, of course, Junwoo isn't going to give them the chance to, like, confess and admit all of it. He's not going to give him that chance. And so now he's going to try to attack Xie Lian to be like, to try to get him out of the way. Oh my God. And of course, when Rui saw Feng Xin shrink back, and then Ming had always blocked every move Junwoo used against him. So the battle's still on. But I just need Xie Lian, I think in the deepest depths of Xie Lian's heart, he knows it's always been Hua Cheng, but he doesn't want to admit that because he doesn't know how somebody could love him despite all of that. And I just need him to ask if it's been Hua Cheng and to come to terms with it. I want them to explode into rainbow butterflies all around them and to be this beautiful thing. And then they just Care Bear stare Junwoo out of existence. I need this in my life. I won't be able to wait until next week. I'm sorry. It's just not going to happen. Sorry. I'm going to have to read the next chapter set. I can't wait. So yeah, that's all. That's all. It's fine. The next chapter set is going to be chapters 239 to 241, pages 87 to 124. I loved everything about this chapter set, and we're finally getting Xie Lian and Hua Cheng to talk to each other and realize all these things that we, the audience, have known for the last how many volumes, and they're finally coming together. They're finally talking it out. Feng Xin and Muqing have not only made up, but they're rooting for Xie Lian and Hua Cheng. They're rooting for them. The Goshi's like, the Goshi's sitting off there at the side with a t-shirt on that says, I just hope all the teams have fun. That's what Mei Qing's wearing right now. Mei Qing's like, I just don't want my former lover to die, but okay. And I don't know what's going to happen. I feel like at this point, Junwoo is kind of beyond the point of being able to live. I feel, but I don't know. And I'm like, I don't know how this is going to go. So what do we do? But we'll just have to figure it out, won't we? So yeah, I cannot wait to hear what y'all think about this chapter set. It's definitely my favorite chapter set in a long time. I will be going back and rereading this a lot, even after the fact, but we're going to come up to the next chapter set soon. Hope y'all are ready. I am, and am not. So, in the meantime, I hope y'all have a wonderful week. Happy New Year! Haha! Happy New Year. I hope y'all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and yes, I'm going to be back very soon with part 76, chapters 239 to 241 of Heaven Official's Blessing. Bye.